Deepside Freedive Chat. This is episode 3. I'm Jana Strain.
Inosia.
Ben McElroy.
And we are here this week with our special guest, Christina Sours. And we're going to talk about competitive freediving. Christina is an amazing diver who recently just attempted an 80-meter dive in Greece. So we figured this would be a great person. She's also new to the Pacific Northwest. And we're excited to hear about your experience. So how did you get into competitive freediving?
Yeah, I did not plan on being a competitive freediver. I feel like when I first got into freediving, I came from being a scuba diver. So you're like, well, I just try it and like see cool things. And of course fell in love with it and started assistant teaching. And when I was going to do my full instructor cert, it was kind of like, well, if I'm going to teach people, then I should probably know at least something about the competitive side. So I did my first competition kind of like almost like attached to my instructor course. And that was an amazing experience. And I got my instructor cert and again, kind of just like went full blown into that and was more like teaching for a while. And I would kind of compete maybe like once or twice after that. We had like a competition in California that was kind of a community event, so I competed there. And then you kind of like just start getting on the train and loving it and enjoying it and keep going back. So yeah.
So where was your first competition?
My first competition was the Azul Freediving Challenge with Pranamaya over in Mexico on the Yucatan side. Which is a really great like first timer comp because they have like a workshop beforehand. So if it's your first time competing, you can like get to the rules and you're with other people. It's their first time, so you feel a little bit less like, oh, I have to be a really deep diver. And yeah, kind of in a supportive environment, I guess. That was my first one. I've been back a couple times since it's like just a really nice community comp. So it's pretty big now. So that's cool.
And you've also represented team and been on Team USA.
Yeah.
Was that one time or multiple times?
That was, so last year I was in the US team. It was originally going to be in Cuba, the competition, and I knew a couple people in my area in Southern California who were like planning on going. They'd been on the team previous years, and I was like, well, like I'll go to Cuba and like cheer you guys on. Like that sounds great. They were like, well, why don't you just compete as well? Like, you have competed before, and, like, you're a decently deep diver. Like, just, apply to the team. And I was like, yeah, okay, I guess if I'm going to go, I could compete. So, yeah, that's kind of how that happened. And I got on the team, and the competition ended up moving to Roatan, which was amazing. So that was a very intense and really cool experience. And then this year, I'm the fundraising director for the team this year that's competing as we speak in Kalamata. So that's been cool as well.
So what are you doing here then?
What am I doing here? Well, I'm getting married in 2 weeks, so there's a lot that went into that. Yeah, and also I'm a wedding photographer, so I kind of have to piece together my competition season between other things. So I have like a whole spreadsheet at the start of the year that I start collecting what competitions are happening when, and then I like look at my calendar and I'm like, okay, where can I go that's like feasible financially that I can also like train for at least a week or two before, and ideally like have a buddy with me who also wants to go. So that's kind of a big part of it's kind of like planning a vacation, except you have a bit of a job to do, I guess.
So walk us through this most recent one in Greece. Actually, I'll do a little preface of this. So I met Christina 4 months ago. Just like we have a pretty good group of line divers here, and we just happened to buddy one time. And so we're diving, I think the line was like 25 meters max. Like we decided we were going to be on the shallow line. Like that was where we were both diving for the day. And she was saying she was getting married and not really diving, and said she'd been on Team USA the year before, and then somebody I coach actually was like, did you see Christina attempting 80 meters in Greece? I was like, I didn't even know she was competing. Like, I thought she was getting married.
But you can't do both.
So tell us about the plan of going there and when you decided to compete and what your preparation was.
Yeah. I mean, I was always hoping to compete this year. I just, like, wasn't sure, like, at what level I was going to compete. And again, that, like, kind of where you squeeze it in calendar, like, where can I go for, like, at least 2 weeks and actually, like, get something out of it. So that was a bit of the puzzle. And I had one of my friends from LA was telling me that he was going to compete in Greece, not at Worlds, kind of taking a break from that intensity. But there was another competition happening a couple weeks earlier. And his brother lives in Greece or has a house in Greece. So he's going to go crash with him for a month and, like, train off of his boat every morning and then go to the competition spot and do kind of the smaller comp, which we were thinking as well would probably be fairly competitive since a lot of people, like, might be in Greece early for Worlds and all that jazz. So I was like, great, can I, like, crash your family's trip to your brother's house and, like, also train with you? Then it kind of fit in the window. So that's kind of, like, how it happened. It kind of logistically worked out. And, like, I've been really trying to figure out, like, when I was going to be able to compete. It was, like, kind of sad that I might not be able to, like, get out and do a comp this year and, like, you know, have the training that goes into it. But it was like, you know what, I really just want to compete. I don't care where, I don't care which comp, just to, like, kind of, like, keep it up and give me an excuse to, like, get out and train a little bit. Because the year before in Worlds, it was like, okay, you know, in, like, February, March when you're on the US team. So that was like, okay, now we're starting training and you kind of get going. And obviously this year I wasn't, like, really able to, like, hit it early. So I was like, I just want to compete and, like, show up. And it'd be great if I, like, got back to my PB from last year, but if not, all good. Just kind of, like, have that motivation to get in the water. So I was very psyched that my friend Alistair kind of had organized this perfect plan.
And that's, like, a little bit of the insight for people. Like, sometimes people say, like, oh, why would you get into competitive freediving? And Christina's, like, really hit on some wonderful points. Freedivers are I've had so many freedivers open their homes to me for me to go and do competitions. Like, I've slept on more people's couches than I wouldn't even recognize them, you know, but they totally open their home to me, let me crash to, like, keep that down, pick me up from the airport, like, shared meals, interpreted other languages. Like, there's a huge community within that, and once you're kind of, like, looped into that, like, it's a very open and wonderful space.
Totally. I mean, that's, like, one of the things that I like most about competing as well, and what kind of got me hooked in the first place is, like, I've made a lot of friends that were with, like, that I met at this very early comp, like the first one I did, that I'm still in touch with, and I still see them, like, throughout the world, like, as we're competing. And it's, like, I don't know, it's a really cool experience to have connections with, like, that with people.
Makes the world feel like a very small place.
Yeah, it does. It's really cool. And, like, safeties in particular, who are, like, the angels of competition. You know, you see them also, like, making the competition circuit, and, you know, they're, like, your angels and best friends. So that's really cool. And yeah, the people and community around competition, you would think, as it's a competition, it's like, oh, like, we're all competing, you know, I'm not going to tell you my numbers, I'm trying to go, like, deeper than you. But most competitions are so varied in what people are diving. Like, some people are diving 20 meters and other people are diving, you know, over 100 meters. Like, there is that much of a range at a lot of competitions. So in a certain sense, you really truly are only competing against yourself. I feel like that's kind of cliche. People say that, but it is true.
You also kind of mentioned how you just kind of, the timing worked out and you just kind of fell into that last competition. So you didn't really, so it sounds like you didn't really have, like, a very strict, like, periodized training regime. And then.
Correct. Yeah. Again, I feel like, yeah.
And then you're still able to go have a great time and whatnot. So you didn't really, to enjoy competing, you didn't really have to put in that, like, extensive, like, 100% committed. Like,
no. I mean, my first comp, I wasn't training at all. I was just diving.
Yeah.
I was assisting courses. I didn't have my instructor cert yet. And you just kind of like show up and do the best you can do. And everyone's like psyched for you. Like, no matter your depth, you're psyched, obviously. People are trying to get records and all that. But like, especially I feel like if it's your first time competing, like everyone there is like so invested in like your white cards or whatever, like consoling you, giving you advice. Like, it's awesome. And even if it's not your first competition, it's like you kind of find your people at the comps. And it's neat because they can be like, again, in that range of depths. Like, you could have like people you're chatting to that are just like so wildly deeper than you. It's like, what would we even talk about? But a lot of the like techniques that you're trying to do with things you're struggling with are the same no matter what depth you're struggling at, if that makes sense. And obviously like people who are near your depth as well, you're kind of going through the same battles and like can kind of trade advice and things like that.
If you were starting all over again, knowing what you know now, this is basically for anybody who's just thinking about, hey, I want to go check out a competition, whether it be here in the States or abroad. Like, what would be your recommendation for the first place to look to, one, get some amount of experience before they go to a certain stage, amount of training, who to reach out to, like how to get from an idea to you're in the water?
Yeah. I would say go with open expectations. Like, I think a lot of people who maybe are going to their first comp, maybe it's nerve-wracking, you have certain like goals you want to hit because it's like it's your first comp and you want to like white card and you want to like get deep dives and stuff like that. But I think I think I'm good at this, which makes competing enjoyable, of like letting go of what the depth is, or how much training, like did my training day work out the day before or not, or this or that. You kind of just have to let it go and let your like body do what it's going to do that day. And there's something very beautiful and like kind of freeing in that. And it also, I think, opens you up more to get all of that like community, like meeting people and things like this. Because if you're too in your head and worried about your depth, even like especially in a first comp, I think you can kind of like retract a little bit into yourself. And part of the joy of the comps is like really like opening up and branching out, and it's less about like PBing at a comp, which not a lot of people do anyway. So yeah, just like being open in expectations, I think.
That sounds like the community aspect of the competitions, or just freediving in general, traveling abroad. That sounds like the fun of the adventure.
I'm going to answer your question too and be a little bit more logical about it. Because Christina put it in a really nice way for like how to approach it from a point of just like getting into it and having the spirit. But if you're interested in competing, there are two types of competition. There's AIDA or CMAS. And then in order to compete in those, you have to be a member of your appropriate national. And all
Which
of those
one
nationals...
does Azul fall under?
Well, Azul is an organization, so they're a competition organizer, and then sometimes organizers will do an AIDA competition one year, and then they'll do a CMAS, or sometimes they'll even do a combined. But in order for you to sign up as a registrant, you already have to be a member of the national. So that's not like CMAS International or AIDA International, that is like AIDA USA or the Freediving Federation of the US. So you already need to reach out, pay your membership fee, send your passport. Like, there's a couple of steps that are actually like you have to do before. And keep in mind that everybody at all of these organizations are volunteers. So if you decide like, oh, tomorrow I want to go sign up and do this freediving competition, you are not going to be allowed to compete, because your AIDA National will not be able to ratify you, process your payment, like do all of those things. Like, you need probably at least 2 weeks in advance, and then you also are going to need a medical form. And even if when you took your freediving course, you can say no on everything in your medical form, you still need a doctor to verify that. And I think CMAS, it has to be every 6 months. AIDA, that's every year. So you have to get a doctor verification. And in North America, sometimes doctors are like, oh, this seems real dangerous. I don't know if I want to sign it.
Yeah.
So there's
definitely some logistics that you have to get into. But anyone anyone can be a part of a national. You don't have to be like chosen to compete. It's like you apply for your national, but the application is like, okay, show us you're a citizen and, you know, pay the dues to the organization, which are fairly minimal anyway.
So national refers to whatever country you live in or are part of, their national freediving competitive organization?
Yes.
And that is that different from who you would take a course with?
Totally.
Okay, so if I took a course with a registered guy named Bob, and then I went to AIDA, I just applied, like, I took intermediate with Bob. And
He's a great instructor.
You don't even need to say, you don't need to have freediving experience or education to sign up with your national.
Okay.
That's fine, but some, like, it's up to the competition organizer. So some competition organizers will say, we're not accepting anybody with less than a AIDA 3 or a Molchanov's Wave 2 to compete in this competition. Like, some organizers will require it. For the organizer, it's a lot of risk. Like, Christina shows up and says she's going to do an 80-meter dive, right? They don't know who this person is, right? They don't know what she's done before. And she can say, well, I did 75 meters last week, but how do they know that? And they have their safeties and their team and everybody, you know, if Christina goes, I should maybe do this about myself. If I go and have a big blackout, right? And then maybe actually Ben is my safety diver and then Ben has a squeeze, then he's out of safety in the rest of the competition, and that puts all the other athletes, you know, at risk. So there is rules and regulations, and organizers kind of put the stopping point, and then judges also. There's all these layers of safety to try to keep everybody involved in the competition safe, right? Like, and Christina's suggestion to go and just like have fun and be really casual, go do what you know you can do on any day, and then have fun. If you're in these places, eat the great food, see all the sights. Like, when you're diving to really the absolute limit of your personal capacities, then you have to sleep a lot, you gotta nap, you gotta stay out of the sun, you can't eat sugar or caffeine, like so if you're trying for, you know, a world record or like, then that's important, but that's a risk that athletes have to really put aside that part of their life to sacrifice to make those big things happen. And you could probably dive 10% less than that and just have way more fun. And sometimes that can be great too. But the best day of a competition is usually the last day, because then everybody celebrates and it's all good. And the only competition that you have to get selected for are world championships, and then you have to be a little bit more organized. You have to apply in advance, and then you would be technically competing against, you know, other people. But we all need each other to dive. Like, if we don't have buddies, we can't prepare.
And I would say too, like, joining your local national, for most countries there will be two, since there's two kind of governing bodies of competitions, and that's CMAS. In the US, the organization is the US Freediving Federation, and then there's AIDA competitions, so that's US Freediving. So you actually have to register with both of those if you're doing like a competition in either one of those bodies or your respective body. It's great to be registered with both if you are even interested in competing, because you can then follow them along and know when competitions are happening. Or, like I was saying, the kind of like little spreadsheet I put together, it's kind of hard to figure out like what comps are happening when, because they happen all over the world. The dates change sometimes. And so if you want to know like what's available to even like, what can I even think about going on next year? Like, I don't know any competition dates for next year. Well, not any, but there's not like a whole lot that's posted and then like, you know, broadcast out and like, I don't know, your classic freediving community groups, like maybe Facebook groups or this and that. But being part of your nationals will actually like get you a little bit in the know of like what competitions are happening when, and that can help you like plan and start to think about things and be like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to compete now, but you know what, like maybe next May I'll be feeling good about it.
And organizers, it's actually a lot of work for them to post it. I don't know about the CMAS stuff, but on the AIDA side of things, usually the competition, you know, it's happening 2 months before it's posted on the actual competition calendar page. So if you start to like get to know, and sometimes organizers will be like, hey, if we host a comp at this time, can you make it? And can you bring other people? Because they want to have, you know, more people happening. So
it's still kind of a very nascent world. So a lot of it's like word of mouth. So like, you know, get to know your local competitive freedivers. Like I was saying, like it's fun to go with someone to compete. So you have that little bit of extra, like companionship, safety net, like advice, like bouncing board kind of thing. That's like also, makes the experience enjoyable.
And a built-in coach. We haven't really talked about the actual experience of competitive freediving, but when you are in competition, you're allowed to bring a coach, and that doesn't actually have to be a coach, but the coach is somebody
like your buddy, your friend,
who can yell the surface protocol at you.
In AIDA they can, in CMAS they cannot.
Oh, they can't?
No.
Okay, so what happens in CMAS?
So, I mean, should we talk about the kind of rules of like what happens?
What's white carding?
Yeah, let's talk about fair question.
Another question after that one.
Let's maybe talk about the general structure of competition, like what is it and like how does it work?
This is about to get long.
We'll do the abbreviated version.
Episode 3, part 1.
Yeah, exactly. So freediving competition, we have pool comps, which I can't really speak to. I'm not much of a pool diver myself, so you can probably speak to that better than I can. So we have pool comps and depth competition. In depth competition, you are going down the line, and the goal is to, you know, go the deepest, you know, for medals and things like that. Or frankly, you're going down the line and trying to get full points for your dive, which is what we call a white card. So
white card is a perfect performance. It means that you made your announced performance.
Okay.
In depth, it means you grabbed your tag off the bottom, and as far as the judge can tell, within that period of adjudication, no mistakes were made. And then white cards are only temporary until the judge will then go and review all of the footage from the dive to see if there was anything that happened in depth. That can often be like maybe the diver touched the line, and so there's all these penalty points that you can get. And sometimes you can get a penalty point and still get points for the dive, right? Like often divers will not grab the tag because they don't need to, you know, and so they'll get what's called a yellow card, which means they got a penalty point because it wasn't a perfect performance, but it was good enough and they got enough points, and then it's, you know, -1 point. So if you announce a 50-meter dive, you don't get the tag, you only get 49 points instead of getting 50. But if your next competitor is at 43 meters, even if they make their perfect dive, it's fine. Like, you're still going to win. But if that 50 meters attempt was a record attempt, you won't get that record because it wasn't a perfect dive. So you'd have to repeat the dive, get the tag, get to the surface, do all that. And then a red card is you get 0 points because you've broken a major rule or you didn't finish the dive. So that's...
Is it common that somebody wouldn't grab the tag, or is that just, it just happens?
Yeah.
Kind of thing?
I mean, you're kind of like pushing a little bit, and it's like this little piece of Velcro on the bottom plate. So sometimes you grab it and then you kind of put it somewhere like in your hood or on your belt or on some Velcro, and it kind of comes off in your process of coming up.
And is there a difference between that yellow tag versus like if you did an early turn?
Yeah, the early turn is always going to be yellow, for sure. But the tags on the bottom plate, like if something were to fail, there's no question if you come back with a tag from the bottom that you made your depth. Yeah. Whereas if you come back without a tag, then they're going to look at the computer that they put on your wrist and say, okay, you said you're going to make 50, computer says 47. Like if you actually turned with the computer hand up, the computer, right? So then you get only 47 points, and then you get 3 penalty points for not making your depth.
The difference.
And so now you're getting 44, and then you didn't get the tag, which means now you're getting 43. And so if that other person made their 43-meter dive, now you're tied for first in that case. So announcements and all of that stuff does come into play. And, you know, the white, yellow, red applies in the pool as well. But the difference with depth and pool competitions, like in the pool, how the order of, in depth, your order of start is based on the conditions, and usually deepest dives go first, or at the time where there's the least amount of current, least amount of problems. So they put it so it's the safest window for the deepest divers. But in pool, your announcement is based on, if I say I'm going to do a 1 second static, I'm going to be the first static out the door. But I can hold my breath for as long as I want to. It just, if I have somebody else coaching me, then I have to get signals, you know. So in static and dynamic, you can swim as long as you want. You're not limited. Whereas in depth, like if you announce 50, that's it. You can't go any deeper.
And typically you're making your announcements the day before the dive. So if the competition opens on a Monday, you're submitting your announcement on like Sunday night. And for Monday night or Monday afternoon, really, like right after you finish your Monday dive, you'd be submitting your announcement for the next day. So that involves a little bit of like mental heart strategy on what you announce, because you can't go deeper. In pool, you can kind of go beyond your announcement, right? In depth, you cannot go deeper than what you announce, right? If you wake up feeling really good that day, the line is going to be set. If you announce 30, the line is going to be set at 30.
So
you're like betting.
Yeah, it is a little bit like betting.
You're like, I bet I could do this.
I bet I'll wake up feeling real strong tomorrow.
I'm actually going for how to cheat. So what's to stop you from just saying, I'm going for 300, and whatever points I make on my dive, is there a certain point where if you say 100 meters, 100 meters, and you only did, God, I gotta do math now. We'll just say just 100.
So let's say you turn at 50.
Yeah. Do you get minus
you get
points for what you
0
did?
points.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you get the difference is subtracted. So
Okay.
you'd rather announce more conservatively.
Gotcha.
Even if you turn early, it's like you pretty much got all your points. If you announce wildly over what you probably can do, all those points are going to go negative.
You can only lose points, Junior.
So if 100 meters is like you've done it in training and it was a great dive, but you're not 100% confident, but on your worst day you can do 75. And freediving competitions have actually changed. Like there's some really nice prizes. A lot of competitions now, when you place first, you'll get a new set of carbon fins. Like there's really great prizes in that way. So if you know that your next closest competitor is a 70-meter diver, why not announce 80 meters, right? And so then you go make that easy dive. Whereas if you go to 100 and then you decide to turn early at say 90, you actually only get 79 points for that dive.
So the way my brain's working is, this tells me that when everyone's gathering together before the competition, before you announce your depth, you got to feel people out to find out what their depths are, so you can strategize what yours will be.
You can if you're if you're
gonna ace this.
I don't have the ability. Strategy.
Yeah. You're gonna be a coach. You're gonna be in the corner for these.
Yeah, right. You're a new strategist. Yeah. Now you're gonna be into kind of freediving.
No ability, but I like all the aspects of the competition.
Yeah, that is a big part of it, right? It is a big part of it, and new freedivers get so nervous about competing. The more that you going to competitions and just having fun. Like when I was first competing, I was so nervous. And I had sponsorship and I felt like I needed to get things I need to do records and I needed to make my sponsors happy. And I remember waking up for this world championship and I was with Natalia Molchanova and I was so nervous. I was like, oh, Natalia, I'm so nervous. And she's like, why? Birth and death are important. This is just fun for adults. Now, she was so strong in her mental state, and she was a fierce competitor. And in the way that we make our announcements and what we do, I was safetying her when she was doing a world record on her 50th birthday. So she did just casual. She did a world record, and at the same time, Ashley Chapman also did a world record. And so there was multiple, Natalia's competition was in Egypt. Ashley's competition, I think, was in the Caribbean. And so there was this kind of Ashley broke Natalia broke the world record, and then Ashley broke it, and then Natalia broke it. And then the way that the competitions work is you have to make the announcement, they have to be published. So Natalia announced a much deeper depth. And then so Ashley announced a deeper depth. And then
But they were in different time zones.
They were in different
So
time
that's,
zones,
like,
but
not usually the case.
but
Usually all come out at once, so you're blind.
So like Natalia announced, so she did the world record on her birthday, and then she announced that she was gonna do like 53 or something. It must have been like 65. So she announced 65, and so then Ashley tried 66, and she blacked out. And then Natalia just didn't start the dive, right? So it was her record until the next competition, and that's part of the fun too. Is like in the not knowing, and every sea is different. Like there's competition happening right now in the World Championships, and it's cold, and so not all divers are used to that. They're not used to the thermocline. Even talking about tags, not all organizers put tags like in the same way. Sometimes they don't get the tag from the bottom because they're like zip tied hard, and your fingers don't work, they're cold or whatever. So there's lots of stuff that maybe you want to announce a dive so that you can be part of the national team. Maybe you just need to do a certain depth deeper than somebody else. Like there's
so what you're saying is line divers in our Pacific Northwest area have a nice advantage there because we're
Honestly,
always cold.
Yeah. But like, well, okay, and the numbers strategy, I will say like it counts if you are trying to record, of course, or place, or if you're near placing. If you are going to a competition, again, there's like a range of divers, right? So like if you're in the middle of that range, it kind of frees you up, and it's pretty liberating. And this is from my experience last year at Worlds, right? Because like I was not setting any records, I was not like medaling anything, and I was so nervous and like super in my head. There was a competition like 2 weeks before the Caribbean Cup, and I was just like I wasn't like talking to anyone. Like after training days, I was kind of like in my room freaking out, and I just felt such like imposter syndrome. Like, what am I doing here? And like, like what am I supposed to announce? And my dives weren't feeling that great. And at a certain point, I realized like I'm not going for any records. I'm not trying to place anything. No one literally gives a flying F what I dive. Like no one's gonna, like except my friends that might be like following along. And after I like, cried it out and had my like no one cares except for me, if I had like the time of my life, and I PB'd on every single dive after that, and it felt like amazing every dive. And I actually ended up getting second overall at the Caribbean Cup, which is hilarious and laughable because they had overall winners, and in each of the category divers, people were literally setting like national records. Wow. But those divers weren't diving every discipline every day because they were saving themselves for Worlds. So like little me with my little, I'm gonna dive great dives every day. Like I got second place, which is pretty dope.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience at a competition in Greece. I actually just wanted to do variable weight. Like that was my point, was to go there and train variable weight. I wasn't even gonna do the regular competition. And then I had some other Canadians that were like, they were having a little kind of a team element. They're like, oh, Jana, you gotta compete. So I was like, okay, fine. So I competed in it, and I did a no fins dive, and I did a free immersion dive, and then the final one was constant weight. And actually, like, there was 3 women that were like neck and neck to kind of win the competition. And before, I was like, well, maybe we should announce, and so we can be the same. And they're like, no, we'll just announce whatever we announce. And anyway, there were 3 of us that if we had all made our announcement that day, we would have tied first place overall for 3. Mm-hmm. Like, and we all did different dives in the different area. And then ultimately, like, the 2 women, they dove before me, and they turned early, they didn't make their dive or whatever. And so on my dive, like, I made my dive, and so I won first place overall, even though I was like second in each individual category, but because the cumulative points were that. And it does take something. Like most of my competitions, I was usually going for a record, and so I was like doing one dive or like saving myself. Like I pretty much never did static because I was always like going for a record and dynamic, and it takes a lot to show up and do. Like, I think what people don't understand when they see these world championships, they see somebody do like a dynamic no fins, a static, and
that might be something worth drilling in a little bit in. it's like you were going for like a dynamic record, so why couldn't you go for a static? What was different about your training so that you couldn't do both?
Well, it's just that when you, like, doing a max performance puts a ton of load on the body, right? So you are not, you just don't have that in you. So, like, you build it up, like, and people who even do long swims in training, they're not really training. You're just taxing your body. Like, that's why in proper training, you're training the different systems. Like, you're training your CO2, you're training your O2, you're training your lactic, and you're, training your mental capacity. And those are all unique different trainings because your body can recover. It's just like if you went to the gym and you work out, like, maybe legs, and then you do arms so that your body has time to heal. If you tax and do, like, a full body workout, your whole body's exhausted. It doesn't know which part of you to heal. So that's what's happening to you when you're doing max performances, be it big statics or long swims or deep dives. Like, that is the limit. And all systems are like, like, we're maxed out, we're tapped out. It's a big breath hold, it's hard on the body, the muscles are failing, like, you're hitting all of that. So you are not fully recovered after one performance. Like, it might take you 2 or 3 weeks, and so when you do multiple dives back to back to back, like, you're not starting at your best, and even if you take a day of rest, you're not gonna be fully recovered.
I know this is like, doesn't even matter.
Sorry. Really quick, for the uninitiated, what are all those things? Like, dynamic, deep dive, I heard.
all the
disciplines.
disciplines. So right now the competitive depth disciplines are, we have constant weight, so CWT, and then there's constant weight bifins.
So
Constant weight is monofin.
So,
Monofin
but
technique.
constant weight can also be done with bifins. This is
Yes.
what I was going to say.
And constant weight means just you have the same weight you left surface with. You wear that weight throughout the entire dive.
This is the case for all of the disciplines, though. They don't do variable
I find
weight.
it confusing with, like, the CMAS competition that's going on as this is being filmed. Is they have constant weight, and there's people with monofins and bifins competing together.
Yes. So constant weight, if it's there's like 4 depth disciplines. One is constant weight, one is constant weight bifins. You can compete in constant weight with bifins as well, but your constant weight is traditionally with a monofin. So they're kind of like, monofin kind of has an advantage. So sure, if you want to throw some bifins and do it, that's fine. It's finning down. And then you have free immersion, so pulling down the rope, pulling up the rope. And then there's constant weight, no fins. So you're swimming down, turning,
The most free of the styles.
and swimming up. Yeah, no fins.
And in the pool, it's like exactly kind of the opposite. Free immersion is static, right? Like, so you have where static is breath hold for time. You're just lying there, chilling out, enjoying the free space for as many minutes as you can. And then dynamic has 3 disciplines in the pool. So it's dynamic with a monofin or monofin kick style. And then it's bifins where it's only bifin kicking. So you can't do the monofin kick on a bifins discipline.
Can you do bifin kicking on monofins?
You can, which is,
You can.
However, and then there's the no fins distance in the pool.
And the difference between pool and
Open
non-pool. So is it
Pool
you're
and
going
depth.
down versus holding your breath? Or?
One is open water and one is called indoor in CMAS. I think AIDA as well, no?
So for layman's terms, for you saying that
So-
you're scratching your chin, pool is, there's got the lanes to the pool and you're swimming back and forth.
Yeah, you can still have a depth competition like in Dubai. They have a 60-meter pool.
Okay.
So you could do.
And you can do a indoor competition technically as well in open water.
Yeah. So but when we talk about depth, we're talking about your whole goal is for deep diving. When we talk about indoor, it's distance or time.
Gotcha.
Cross.
Typically, when we talk about pool, although they could have a pool competition
Deep pool.
in a deep pool, and it'd be really cool if they did have some more of those deep pools specifically. In
So
North
like that
America.
one video of the lady who was like up in the Arctic or whatever, going that triangle hole. I'm sure we've all
Yeah,
seen
those are ice diving dynamics. So they're not, well, you can do ice diving depth too. There's like different, depending on your organizational body too. There's different records you can take that aren't necessarily part of a competition.
Yeah, so some of those other, like their Guinness World Record attempts, and they have a lot more of a broad definition, but kind of classic freediving, it doesn't take into the water temperature, which is, it's been talked about, like maybe we should have cold water records versus warm water records, because
Like your
diving 100 meters in cold water is very different than diving 100 meters in warm water. There is, it's a whole another experience, thicker suit, more weight. So a lot of, and even the records that for variable weight and no limits, those aren't done in a competition setting. Those are just record attempts because they are much more dangerous. But classic competition setting, those are going to be the 4 disciplines in depth, the 4 disciplines in pool, and then CMAS does this one, the box. They also have the box, and I think CMAS has like a lot more.
Some other like fin swimming-esque
kind of
things that aren't, I guess they're still in the freediving realm, but
closer to the swimming competition.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Yeah.
But
I remember my question from earlier. I apologize to everybody who already knows the answer to this, but I was just curious during the competition. So we talked about earlier for depth diving, your set time, say it's 2:05 p.m., you got 30 seconds to get your butt underwater. What are you doing prior to that 2:05? Like, are you in the water an hour before? The whole time? Are you sitting on a floating platform meditating? Like, what does that lead up look like?
So you announce the night before or the day before, and then the night before you're assigned official top time. And this is, as we talked about, to the minute. So your top time might be 10:53 a.m., like on the dot. So if you back up, let's do 10:45 so I can do easy math. If you back up, you are allowed to get in the water 45 minutes before your OT, before your official top. So if my time was assigned 10:45, I can get in the water at 10 a.m. Technically, I can get a red card if I get in earlier. There's some like leeway in terms of like if you're putting on your suit in the water and whatnot. But for the most part, you aren't allowed to start warming up until 45 minutes before your dive.
And just gonna pause on that. Back to the what should I do if I want to compete? You should read the rules first and foremost, and you should follow them to a T, because you do need to check in before your dive.
Like 1 hour before.
Yeah, you have to check in with the official competition, and if you want to do stuff like you want to go to the bathroom, you actually have to let an official know, hey, I would like to go to the bathroom, and they get to come with you. To make sure you're not breathing oxygen or doing anything. And different competitions are a little, more relaxed on that, but you do always have to let them know, like, you want to put your wetsuit on? I would like to get in you ask permission. Is it okay if I can put my wetsuit on in the water? And they'll say yes or no. And if they say no, you have to listen.
They can say, like, sorry, you have to wait until 10 a.m. you're allowed to get in the water.
Because they have to treat every athlete exactly the same. And so if they give you leeway, then, it's same thing who, like, judges that are instructors. They're like, I can't ask you, I can't coach you anymore because I'm now being a judge. Like, there's stringent. So sorry.
So no one poops in their suit here?
I was wondering that for the peeing in the suit part.
Yeah, peeing in the suit, absolutely. But so 45 minutes, you get in the water, and for the most part, actually one of the biggest learning curves of when you start to compete, I think, is figuring out your pre-dive routine. It is best to have it as a routine because you want to eliminate any variables that can affect your dive as is in your power. So 45 minutes before your dive, you get in the water. I used to be a diver that's like, hey, we do like warm up at 10, and then warm up at 20, and then warm up at 30, and then warm up at 40. Okay, now I feel ready for 50,
So you have a practice line to warm up on too.
So yeah,
okay,
so there's typically warm up buoys that have a safety on them that are kind of next to or near the official line. So you can get in the water 45 minutes early. You go to your warm up buoy, say hi to your safety, and then you tell your safety what you're doing to warm up, and you do your thing. Typically, those safety lines are set open lines, and the safety will tell you how deep. So they might say, okay, this buoy is 20-meter line, this buoy is a 30-meter line. So if I want to warm up at 10 meters, I gotta like have my alarm or kind of know where I am.
And most people don't really do very deep dives for their warm-ups either. It's usually pretty shallow.
Yeah, so kind of like that 10, 20, 30, 40 part of my learning curve in my first competition was like, okay, actually I don't want to do that because it takes too much time. I came up from like, you know, my fourth warm up and I had to dive. I think this was like in a training day where they kind of, the organizers simulate the same conditions as competition. And I had like 2 minutes to breathe up for my target dive, and that's like not what you want to do.
And in the warm-up buoys, you also have all the other athletes that are there, and so sometimes your warm-up can get a little messed up because somebody else is on the line and they're doing a 4-minute hang at 30 meters and you're waiting for them to come up and you're like, okay, I was ready to dive like 5 minutes ago. So you have to sometimes be a little bit flexible if you have warm-up dives, because you don't always, it's not always your perfect condition. And a lot of like the top athletes in the world, they just do no warm-up dives. So they'll just...
Or one. I think one warm-up is probably one of the more common.
Yeah.
No warm-up, obviously, people do that. But it's not like everyone does no warm-up dives, which I feel like is maybe a notion of competitive diving. Is that like you don't warm up, but most people do some sort of warm-up, at least mentally.
Well, they have a preparation for sure, and there's just kind of like what we talked about earlier, where like you put load on your body by going into that, and it's not like people get into no warm-up diving. Like, I'm not gonna say I'm a 60-meter diver, and then so like I'm just gonna try a no warm-up dive today and try 60 meters. Like I'm gonna try a no warm-up dive at 25. Like I'm gonna go less than half of what my PB is, and see how that works for me and see if I like that. And you have all these other things to consider. How warm is the water? How warm is the air? How much sun is there? When did I eat? Like what, where's the location of the bathroom? Like there's a lot of things to think about in preparation that you have to consider. Like if I want to be in the water a long time, I need a thicker suit. If I need a thicker suit, I need more weight. That means I'm going to have to work harder to get up off the bottom. So there's like...
Yeah, so I had done 3 warm-up dives typically, which was like a shallow hang, a still shallow hang, but a little bit deeper, and then an FRC dive, so an exhale dive. And that was my warm-up, and then I go to my target. I found in Greece this year, that was too much.
FRC?
Yeah, you exhale, not fully, and then you go down. So it's kind of like simulating depth on your lungs, puts a little pressure on your body. And I find that's good if I'm about to do a very, very intense dive.
That's great.
That was wonderful.
Well timed.
So you just did the Greece thing.
Yeah.
Could you just go through the day, your prep, your thing, the sensations to the point where you got to the bottom, coming back, just walk us all through?
I have a pre-question though.
Okay.
But
you said, what was your PB last year?
Last year my PB was 70.
Okay, and did you do that at Roatan?
I did. Yeah.
And then you were thinking maybe you would do more on that on Greece. So that was your goal.
That was my goal, was to like hit it again.
So talk us through your year. Right?
Sure.
So
I'll go from the year to the day.
Right, so you did 70 last year in what, August? Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, and
a long time ago.
Cool. So then,
yeah.
Did you keep doing 70?
No. So I hadn't, and this was the same, I think, before Worlds. Like I do a lot of shallow training, and I do not do depth diving until like pretty close to around when I want to like do the depth. So last year, I hit 70 at Worlds on like my last day. I was super psyched about it. It wasn't like, I felt any strain or anything, but it's not an easy dive. It's a long dive.
What discipline?
I did that in bifins. I think it was constant weight bifins. I know I did it with bifins, so I wasn't sure if it was constant weight. So then I, went back to kind of my teaching routine, and which is a lot of like shallow repeat dives and like fighting swell and stuff like that. So it is some dive conditioning, as you guys know. But when I would go out, like on the rare times I'd kind of go out on training days for fun, I was kind of keeping them like training days for fun. I wasn't like trying to like, okay, this is my one day out, like as I've been teaching for a month, so I'm gonna like PB today. And I was also diving in California, which is cold water. So I was not like going and trying to do like 70 meter dive, like get back to 70 meters in California. But that was fine because I knew even like the year before that, when I did do more like regimented training, I still wasn't doing like deep depth dives. I was probably capped. I mean, I was hoping last year to hit 60. And I kind of capped most of my training at 40. Maybe I did 45 on a day when I felt really good, but a lot of my kind of training leading up to it is FRC, so like exhale dives, repeat shallower dives, and it's a lot of EQ dry training. Pool I do some, but probably not as much as I should. But a lot of lung stretching and dry equalization training is mostly what I was doing. And this year, yeah.
So when you say cap at 60, that was your goal at Worlds, or that was your goal in California?
No, that was my goal last year at Worlds, was like, I really want to hit 60. And I had done a competition. I'd done training in a competition before Worlds where I'd already surpassed it. So I was like, great. Yeah. I'm in. This is part of my come to Jesus at Worlds, was like, you've already hit your goal. Like, don't worry about it.
So in your preparation at home, you're like, okay, I'm going to cap it at 45. And then when I head to Worlds and I have a few weeks or a month in preparation, my goal is to ultimately get to 60. So like for you, I mean, that's significant. Like that's like, do math, 33% more than you've already dove, but then you have that time to get there.
Yeah. So I'd been at 50 meters like for a long time, and I'd just been teaching and not training. So I kind of knew like 60 was there for me. So I did do a training trip like in the spring. I went to Dominica for like 2 weeks, and I again did one of those weeks as completely shallow training. I don't think I went beyond 30 meters for a week. And I was like, you got a week and you're trying to increase 10 meters. Like that is a big, or 2 weeks for 10 meters is like a big goal. And so the first week, I was like working with a friend who was kind of helping create my training routine. And he's like, just stay shallow and like get your technique and your EQ like solid. And I did that, and then like the depth just like came the next week. It just like dropped.
Did you dive every day? Like on the like you were there for 14 days. Did you dive every day?
No, I took rest days, which are really, really important as well. So yeah, but I tried to really squeeze a lot out of it. So I probably only took a couple of rest days in those 2 weeks.
So when you did your, let's just say 7 days of 30 meters, and then you decided, okay, now I'm going to start going for your depth. How did you get from 30 to 60 in the week? What did your days look like?
So I would do like shallow mouth fills. So mouth fills when you're putting air in your cheeks to equalize past when you can't really equalize anymore. So I was doing shallower mouth fills than I was previously, and I was trying to hit depths that I'd been to before, aka do a shallow mouth fill, hit 40, do a shallow mouth fill, hit 50. Okay, did that feel good? Okay, do that shallow mouth fill and hit 53, 55. That felt good. Okay, now I'm trying to do my target, which is 60. Decrease my mouth fill depth a little bit. I think even I was mouth filling at 10 meters, and it was like, okay, now mouth fill at 12.
Wow.
And I got my target, so I was psyched about that. So when I showed up for the competition, I went and did the Azul challenge again, and I was doing a little bit deeper than 60 and feeling really good about it. So then once I got to Roatan and it was Caribbean Cup, after I got over my little mental twang, it was like, okay, well, I can do these dives. And yeah, it just went super smoothly. So this year I was like, okay, I haven't been able to do like all the, mouth fill training, and I haven't had a big training trip this year. I got to go spend 2 weeks, in Dominica doing this. But I was like, I feel like if I, am able to dive a little bit at least, then I'd love to get back to, I didn't even know if I could, to be honest. I was like, I'd love to get back to 70. So that's why I kind of set that goal there. Just like, if I get to go compete, it'd be sick if I get back to where I was. So 80, like hitting 80 was definitely a reach, not even in my goals. And it was kind of a similar thing where when we were in Greece training beforehand, we only brought a line on our buoy that was 60 meters max. So I just like hit that basically for 2 weeks, like hit it. I would maybe hang on some of them, but I'm not a huge hanger. I'd be a terrible spearfisher woman. But I was like, okay, 60 easy. So then when I showed up for the actual competition training days, of course I still had the same, like, first training day was terrible, and I was in my head like, oh god, I'm not gonna be able to get back to 70, and like, because I was like, oh yeah, I've been hitting 60, like, okay, set it. I might have even tried just to get 70 that first training day.
With those
and
60 ones, were you just doing normal dives, or were you doing like any exhale or?
No, I was still doing FRCs to warm up. Like maybe the first few days I was staying shallow. I didn't like show up and go 60 right away. Because I'd been here. I just moved here. I was doing, again, some of my shallow training to get my EQ like where I wanted it. Yeah. But when I was hitting those 60s, I set my mouthfill alarm at 10 and like was like, I can't drop the alarm deeper. Like I have to be able to hit 60 with an earlier mouthfill. Wow. So that when I want to go deeper, it's like my EQ, I know my EQ will be there.
And you're not recharging at all?
I was not recharging on those.
Wow.
So
I was recharging for 80.
Take a step back for Sam and I explain what is recharging is.
Yeah, so we're talking about that mouthfill.
And the significance of what a mouthfill is
I
versus...
thought a mouthfill was where you put water in your mouth.
Just flood your
cannot do
whole
a
body.
mouthfill
So for you
right
guys,
now.
you know when you get down to depth and you can't equalize anymore, right? Like if you hit that depth where you like you can no longer equalize.
Not yet.
I've reached that yet.
So that's what happens. Eventually, everybody hits a depth where like you can't equalize anymore, and so what people do is they use this technique they'll call mouthfill, and so they'll bring air up and they'll hold it in their mouth on the descent, and then that's all the air you have to get fully down to the bottom. And so it's a combination. You got to hold your glottis. You have to keep your soft palate in neutral, aka you can breathe out through your nose and your mouth at the same time. You got to keep your tongue relaxed. And you're, holding as much air as possible. And then you're equalizing. So sometimes people will do constant pressure where they'll just hold their eustachian tubes open, right? But you're under a complete vacuum at that point. So if you
lose concentration,
if you lose your glottis, right, or if you try to Frenzel equalize, that can make it just like it opens up the air and it goes down into your stomach. And at that point, there isn't any air that you can bring up anymore. So you're stuck and you have to stop and turn early. So that's where Christina's talking about doing these equalization drills. So if normally if a person takes a mouthfill at 10, she's probably still could bring up some air even at 30 meters. So she could re-top that up. And that's what like you'll see a lot in the dive eyes big competitions. You'll see a diver might take their mouthfill at 20 or 25. And then they'll go down a bit, and they might even be able to top up as deep as 40 or 45. But if, she's doing like some ultra regimented training, like she's carrying that mouthfill from, I know that you love the imperial system, but we're just going to hard
I'm trying to keep up with my math as best as possible.
We're going to hard metric it right now. So at 10 meters, the pressure is 2 bar, right? And she's taking that down to 60 meters, which is 7 bar. So it's that pressure differential change. So she's going 3.5 times the pressure change. So she instead takes that mouthfill at 20 meters, that's 3 bar, and she can go 3.5 times that. That's, so much math. That's 105 or 95 meter dive if her mouthfill is exactly perfect, right? Like,
so this is part of the reason it's good to train these shallow dives and to train, if you train on an exhale, it intensifies that vacuum. So you have to be really good at managing that air in your mouth to be able to equalize. So kind of keeping yourself, I mean, a lot of the temptation when you're somewhere awesome is like, okay, I'm gonna go deep. So you want to do whatever it takes to go deep. So you're gonna do your mouthfill a little bit deeper and like all this stuff. But if you actually hold yourself back a bit, and this is like the technique fine tuning, right? It's like for the payoff later. So yeah, and I did end up changing it up a little bit because I think going from like 10 or even 15 meter mouthfill to 70 was like pushing my control a little bit. So I did end up adding a top off, which was new for me, doing a little bit of one. But you have to be careful with where you are topping up your mouthfill because, again, the pressure gets quite intense quite fast. And if you've already taken a big mouthful of air from your lungs. You don't want to pull so much again if you're already quite deep. Like 40 would be pretty deep for top of, again, unless you're going like over 100 meters.
Yeah, I mean those ones were, and like it's one of the things that Christina's talked about is routine, right? Like doing the same thing and doing the same training, and you know, if she's constantly taking a mouthful at 10, you know, and then you suddenly try to take it at 20, it can be completely different and have a completely different feeling, like in the competition. I have had 3 dive computers for a long time. 2 were just like scuba diving computers, and so I always had a spare computer to put in my hood when I was competing with a depth alarm, and I always had my computer on my wrist. But both of my scuba diving computers finally died after 2 decades. So
that's a good lifespan.
Yeah, they were great. They were so great. Actually, I probably.
How many batteries did they go through?
I mean, I went through batteries. But the last time I changed the batteries on when the dive alarm stopped working, so it's not useful in that. But at the most recent competition that I did, which was How Deep, I was like, okay, well, I'll set my depth alarm to be a little bit deeper, and then I didn't have an opportunity on the warm-up because the platform was really far away. It took me 15 minutes to swim out, and so I had one warm-up, and then I had to like go do my dive. So I changed my depth alarm on my computer, and I didn't hear it until I was already at 29 meters. So at that point, I couldn't bring up a full mouthfill. I could only bring up a partial mouthfill, and so I turned early on my dive because I knew I wasn't going to be able to get to 46 with, you know, a partial mouthfill in cold water. And so I, you know, for me actually, like it's really easy for me to be like, oh yeah, no, competition all fun, but like when I'm actually there and I'm in the moment, I'm usually a fierce competitor, and I go and I don't listen to my body, and so it's, for me, like turning early is really like being humble and just like listening to myself. It turns out I actually had an ear infection. So it was probably good that I chose not to ride my ears.
Glad you didn't get a rupture.
For the competition, you know. I mean, it's all of those things, but I changed something. And I never had an opportunity to dive it, and so then that makes competition not go well.
They have great computer. I mean, I think you posted about the dive bud. There's like little computers that you put in your hood. There's no screen on it or anything, but you will hear it, and you can like set. You know, do you want 2 beats? Do you want 3? Do you want them to be long, short? And that's
vibrating.
Because the launch ones are usually so quiet. It's
I can never. Oh, and especially in cold water.
Yeah,
it's like
music through it.
Yeah, is that a thing? I've always wanted that.
Just playing all the way down.
It's actually really cool. It does a surface interval. So when you are like, it does either, you know, the depth divided by 5 or the double the bottom time. It takes whatever's most conservative. So when you're on the surface, it'll give a beep if you want it to when it's okay to dive, which I think is awesome. Like I forgot my dive computer one weekend when I was out, and I had just bought this dive eye, and so I spent 4 days, 2 dive sessions a day with only my dive bud, and it was great. Like I knew exactly where I was. Like you can do alarms on the descent and alarms on the ascent.
Alarms, I will say, for longer dives is like, okay, the way up starts getting long when you're, and I'm like, okay, like, can we, and you want to, like, change your speed, too, right? So, like, maybe you gotta kick
I know, even on the shallow dives, like, when I see my buddy at, like, 10 or 20 meters, I'm like, oh, good, I'm almost there.
Exactly. So the ascent can be like, whoo.
And on training dives, like, your buddy is not always consistent. Like, on a comp dive, when the comp safety, at the orientation for the comp, they'll say, you know, divers diving this depth or below, your first safety is going to meet you at this depth. So, and they are on it. Like, they never miss a beat, right? So,
but they might not always be in your vision.
Right, true.
I would like to be able to see that.
You know, in that, but if you do get it, you kind of get, like, how I used to dive before, and I'd be like, okay, so now my diver's here, so now I'm at 30, right? So I know I've got another 30 seconds, right? But with the dive bud, it is 100%. You know you're at that depth, and so then you can slow or do however change your technique. It's also sort of like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. All right.
So it's real nice on the way down, but sometimes on the way up, it's like, oh man.
Yeah. It's kind of a nice way to judge your dive though too. Like, okay, the way up, sometimes it feels like it comes like really late. Like, oh gosh, I haven't even heard my alarm yet. And that can be a mental thing that you really shouldn't be dependent on. But sometimes like when you hear it, like on my 80-meter dive, my EQ was really, I was really reaching at the end of that. Like I almost announced 81, but I didn't want to like compete with someone else. I was like, I'm happy with 80. Like that would be a phenomenal thing. And I actually planned to turn early on that dive. I was like, we'll just kind of set it there just in case. But I remember on the way up, like I had a monofin on, so, I was going fast, I guess. But I like remember hearing my ascent alarm and being like, oh, sick. Like I'm going to make this dive. Like, it's like cool to hear that. And
that's a perfect transition, actually.
Yeah.
So like, you're in your wetsuit, you're already going for it, and what like from the beginning to down there to back, like what is the whole thing like for someone who doesn't know? Like,
yeah, like on the dive itself.
What does it smell like? How does it feel? What does it look like? Like all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it does kind of start like the prep for it like the day before and all that, but the actual dive itself, like once you
start there too. Yeah.
Yeah, you want me to go all the way?
Yeah, let's just do it.
Okay. Speaking of routines, most people.
So you did this on the last day of a multi-day competition?
The 5th day.
And did you dive on day 4?
Yeah, I did no fins.
So you did a no fins dive to what depth?
50 meters.
Okay. And then you knew it was your last day to announce. Had you done a constant weight in the other days?
Yeah, I'd done a monofin dive the first day.
To what depth?
To 75.
And it was good?
Well, by that time, it was new to do the recharge mouthfeel, so they felt almost like easy. This is why I was like, I might as well try it, like go for it. Otherwise, I would not have made a 5-meter jump because that's quite a large jump for deep divers.
So you made a 75, and then what'd you do on day 2?
I did 70 free immersion.
And then day 3?
Day 3, what would that have been?
Bifins?
Bifins, also 75.
Okay. And then day 4, you did
day
no
4
fins,
rest.
50?
Day 4 was rest.
Oh, okay.
And then there was no fins, 50, which honestly was the dive I was most nervous about, like the whole comp for seemingly arbitrary reasons, because it was fine, but it was in my head.
And then it's your last day, so you've had all white cards to this.
All white cards. Okay. Feeling pretty hot. Yeah. EQ is fine. I got like my dive that I was most nervous of like done.
And now this is it. Like you're going back home to the U.S. when this is done.
Yeah.
So you decide to go 5 meters deeper, which also not all comp organizers will let you do that.
Yeah, sometimes it's 3 meters is like the cap, very commonly past your PB.
Yeah. So they allowed you to announce it, and then you put it in. So then like walk us through after that.
Yeah. So I announced the 80. I did go like, so if I had announced 81, I would have gotten second. I would have bumped someone else that had done an 80 meter constant weight already. So if I had done 81, I would have bumped them to third, and I would have gotten second if I made it. But I was kind of like, that's not why I wanted to do this dive. I really don't care about I've made all my dives. I'm happy with my performance. So it's going to be 80. If it's anything, it's going to be 80. But again, it was kind of like a reach. Like,
and you're already pushing 5, so that's all.
Yeah, I'm already pushing 5. So that's why in my head I was like, I will kind of plan on turning early. Like, I'd like to do at least 75 again. I had my depth alarm for 75 of like, here you are.
And that's the interesting thing too about like that choice is that even though it's 1 meter, which is literally 2 seconds difference in the dive time, the pressure of like knowing in the background that I am now competing for second, I'd be bumping this person, how could this be perceived? Like that's enough to make the difference between being okay and having a blackout.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a lot of things going on in the subconscious to like that we might not even be thinking about it that can bubble up and then cause a problem on a dive.
Just a quick one, because I know like all the thoughts that's going through your head prior to your dive. How much time do you have when you're allowed to be on the line you're diving on for your actual time slot prior to your dive?
So usually, we'll keep going in the sequence. So I announce you basically they'll bring you over at least 3 minutes before. Typically, ideally 5 minutes. You're on the competition.
And you're on your warm-up buoy for like 40-ish minutes before that.
Less than that if you might get cold or you're only doing 2 warm-up dives. So I was getting a bit cold in my wetsuit. So I usually like to have plenty of time, space it out, yada yada.
What thickness of suit were you wearing?
I was in, I don't know because it was my suit from last year that Best Dive gave us. So I think it was probably like a 2.5 top and 1.5 bottoms, but unclear. Thinner than I'm used to. But it's a pre-suit. So
and it's Greece, so it's cold. Is there a thermocline in Greece?
There are thermoclines, and they move every day. So this is where the water suddenly gets a lot colder, for anyone who doesn't know. It's a thermocline, and they really mess up your equalization.
I remember there was a really strong one I was diving in Croatia once.
Yeah.
And it was around 25 meters is where the thermocline hit. And the visibility is great. You can actually see them from the surface at that distance.
Wow.
And you can watch people go down. They look completely relaxed. They just start their free fall. They'd be all great. Then they hit that thermocline and you just see them go,
yeah.
And then almost all of them would turn to come back up.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a question. So why do you say that the thermocline is bad for your equalization?
Because if you have a wimpy and sensitive face like I do, you're very sensitive around, especially your eyes. So as soon as that cold water, it can sense the temperature change a lot, and it will kind of mess up your throat, your glottis, and things like this that need to be controlled while you have something like a mouth fill, or even when you're trying to adjust Frenzel. My throat locks up as if I'm about to drown when it senses a little bit of cold water on it. So this is why you see a lot of divers wearing goggles of some kind. A lot of the time that's because, not even that they can see, because a lot of time those glasses are flooded with water, but they're so that hit of sudden cold is less intense. But so the dive itself, you make your announcements the night before. Usually I'm having small dinner and a plentiful dose of ice cream, which is a no-go for most divers, but I gotta get those good feelings going. And then morning of, people are for the most part, very regimented about their routines. Again, trying to take away the variables that can affect your dive. So
what was your top time for your dive?
Oh, I don't know. It was a decent top time. Probably around 10 a.m. sometime.
Okay, we'll use 10 a.m. just so it's easy for your math.
Thank you. Yeah, so and you're assigned a time with your top of when you get shoveled out on the boat too. So it's you got to show up on the beach at 8:30. I think was my typical boat time out. And then you wait on the competitor boat a certain amount of time before you get in the water. So you want to kind of time, okay, I'm going to go to the beach at X time. If I have to get the boat at 8:30, I'm going to be at the beach at 8 so I can kind of get my wetsuit on and then chill so I'm not feeling rushed trying to catch the boat. Okay, once I get the boat out, I'm going to, 10 minutes before my official top, I'll have my bit of water, I'll get my watch set up, I'll make sure I have my lanyard on and my, whatever accoutrements you need to put on for your dive. And then I'll get in the water,
Not before your official top, but before your warm-up.
Before my warm-up, before I go, for my warm-up. And I kind of time out my warm-up of okay, if I'm doing 2 warm-up dives, I want to be doing absolutely nothing at least 10 minutes before my dive. Everyone, again, is very different with how long they want to just sit there and do nothing before their dive. For me, I was I want 10 minutes. So then I kind of back up from that. Each dive, I want 5 minutes for each dive. So you really only need half an hour of warm-up, I think is what I was kind of doing. So you do your warm-ups. I really focus on my warm-ups on making them feel, honestly, kind of like I do with a lot of my off-season training of training the good feelings, which I think is very, very important. For freediving in general, but I think for deep diving in particular, because there's a lot of stress on your body and anxiety that can come from deep diving. So, for any dives that you're pushing, it's really important to bring your attention to the good feeling dives. So sometimes I try and make those my warm-ups. So my warm-ups, just feeling good. Then you kind of go to the like waiting area, which is usually either another buoy, sometimes it's a boat, sometimes there's a platform you can sit on, and you kind of just sit there and breathe for like 10 minutes. You can kind of close your eyes, take a little sleep.
In the water,
How effective was that for you? Like, were you feeling a lot of nerves from the competition while you're trying to do these warm-ups? And
Yeah, so it depends on the dive. It depends on like what you announced. Like, ooh, does this feel like a tough announcement for me? And most of what this makes sense. Most of what you're feeling is entirely within your control. But I guess things like the water conditions, you'd be like, ooh, this looks a little spicy today. Like, this dive might be not as easy as I thought. But
with depth too, like sometimes there's hella current, and you don't get to change your announcement in depth, and that can be really hard. Like, there's definitely been world championships where it's currenty, but they still dive, and then there's a lot of blackouts because people, that
swimming like 2 times harder than you.
Yeah, I actually think that there should be a rule that if there is bad conditions underwater, you should be able to announce 5 meters deeper. Like, you should be able to, or within 10% of your dive at least, right? Because 5 meters on a 40 meter, 5 meters isn't the same on, a 50 meter dive as it is on 100, but,
Or maybe you get like a yellow card if you turn early, but you don't get you get 5 points that aren't subtracted. I don't know, something.
Yeah, just something that's a little bit different like that, because, sometimes you talked a little bit about it, like financially, if you're going to these comps and world championships, sometimes you just have one dive for the discipline, like where some of these other comps you have multiple days where, I'm going to do constant weight, and then I have another day to do constant weight, but it's like easily $10,000 to compete in a depth competition. If you're going to go somewhere, you're probably paying $700 to, it's a multi-day competition, you're probably paying anywhere from $700 to $1,000 in entry fee. You flew there, you're staying there, even if you're being kind of dirtbaggy.
You've probably been training somewhere else for 2 weeks before.
You've got like all the food, the accommodation. A lot of these places happen in remote places where you've got car rentals. You probably bought a new suit. You've got it's expensive, so even if you're a sponsored athlete, they're usually not giving you money, right?
They're giving you your fins.
Yeah,
your suit.
Here's your wetsuit, but they're not pitching in for all of the other things that are part of it. So.
Yeah, but you have to try and not, once you're on the day, once you're there to dive, it will serve you best to put all of that to the side, because you're only going to be able to perform what you perform. And so part of the 10 minutes before dives that I'm doing is just trying to focus purely on breathing. I guess it's kind of meditation, but I'm not a normal life meditator. So
yeah, what's your breathe up like? What are you thinking about? Or tidal breathing, visualization?
I'm anticipating how great the dive is going to feel. So people officially call that a visualization of the dive. So you kind of imagine yourself doing the dive. Some people are very diligent about this, and they do it to a timer, and they have someone timing them and telling them the beeps when their alarms go off and things like that. For me, it's more the feeling of the dive. Sometimes it skips forward or back, or I kind of pause and think about my mouth fill, and I try and almost anticipate all the great things that are going to happen, how nice it's going to be, how good the free fall is going to feel, I'm going to really nail, I can feel myself nailing this mouthfeel as it's shrinking, and that's what I'm thinking about before the dive, or I just let my mind kind of sit there, but it's mostly trying to focus on nice things or nothing.
And then you have the official organization that's taking the computer off of one athlete, pulling your wrist, maybe checking your lanyard. Oh, it's time for you to enter the comp zone. So.
Yeah, and that's normally 5 minutes before. So then you get dragged over to the line, and now everyone's kind of watching you, and you feel a little bit more of the external pressure. And they're all right, 4 minutes, and you're okay.
This is CMAS because AIDA only gives you 2 minutes.
But they'll bring you over to the line before.
But they don't announce.
They won't tell you. Okay.
Yeah,
I honestly I think that's depends on the organizer. Because I've done AIDA comps where they will give you the time at 3 minutes or before that.
It's been protested.
Okay.
So if like people heard them say if they've done a 5 minutes and then the athlete thought it was 2 minutes. Yeah. And so then they protested it, and then they had to give them another dive. And
oh wow.
Yeah, there's
drama.
Yeah, there's.
But in AIDA, you can have a coach who is verbalizing time, though they don't have their time synced to the official, so that's where it gets sticky. But
so now you're in it.
Yeah. So officially,
officially
at 2 minutes, you're supposed to be hooked into the line with the official gauge on, and you just have to kind of sit there and wait for your official top to the second to come, and the judges will tell you, okay, 2 minutes, all right, minute and a half, 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then they start counting you down at 10 seconds, and then the pressure is kind of, you have to kind of be prepping. When do you take your breath? At what point are you kind of putting on any goggles you have, or any nose clip, or this or that? So usually, again, I kind of just like to be ready. So usually around 2 minutes, I already have like my nose clip on, like I'm just kind of waiting to take my deep breath. And breathe up wise, I'm doing tidal breathing. If I feel like stressed out, maybe I'm slowing down my exhales a little bit at 2 minutes, but by 1 minute, I'm like trying to do as naturally as breaths, like not manipulating it at all as possible. And then right before, at about, when they say 20 seconds, I do one last like sigh, like, and then at 10 seconds, I start my last, my one big breath. And then, I do 5, 4, 3,
do you add packing to that
1,
peak inhale?
I'm not really a packer. I've never like invested time in doing it properly because I never have needed it. And it adds a lot of stress up here to the initial part of your dive. And for me, the first 10 to 15 meters of any dive is very stressful. Like the duck dive and the kicking, and my shoulders are all the way up here. Yeah. It's like, and this is part of what I envision is that like, okay, the first 10 dives is going to be what I was seeing. It's going to be shitty, sucky. And then, it's going to be sucky. And then like after 15 years, it's like, oh yeah, like, here we are. Yeah.
So is that how that dive went?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, that was a breathe up, so now we got to get to the actual dive.
Now the dive. Yeah. So I was with a monofin, which I have not trained that much with because it's kind of a pain to like bring around anywhere. So I'd done a little bit of training with it in Greece, like maybe a couple dives, a couple of those 60 meters before. And I did my 75-meter dive with it, so I was like, I feel like I should be, if I brought it all this way and the airline like lost my bag and all this drama, so I was like, I'm gonna like get this fin going. So I had, my monofin going, and it's kind of like awkward to get the hang of. So the start of the dive, they're fun though. Yeah, they are fun. I was really focused on keeping my movement like slow and relaxed in the first 15 meters, which to me, like feeling wise, felt okay. It always feels a little bit clunky because I'm not really used to it. But again, in my brain, I'm thinking like, okay, just smooth down, smooth out. Because you kind of stop kicking after 30 seconds anyway. So it's like, okay, smooth it out. And then I get my 15-meter mouth fill alarm. So I get my nice mouth fill. Monofin is tricky as well, and something I struggled with in my first competition dive.
So even for the 80 meters, still there's 15 meters is when you took it.
Yeah, I still took it at 15. Okay. Well, my alarm went off at 15, so I was probably taking it more like 16, 17, yeah. And then I kind of, try and keep the rhythm of the kicks going down, and then my second mouthful alarm / free fall alarm goes off. I think that was at 25. So I take my like little top up.
You free fall from 25 down to 80.
Well, I kick a couple past 25, but yeah, probably like 30. By 35, I'm definitely free falling. Monofins are fast. You're going pretty fast down with the monofin, so I was feeling like on my first dive that my alarms came like sooner than I was ready for. So they were kind of like surprising, and like I didn't quite get my full proper mouth fill, and I was kind of like jolted by them. So on this one, it was like, okay, this is going to like kind of go fast at the start of the dive. And then, yeah, usually by like 30, 35, I'm free falling. And then free fall with the monofin, I'd been having like an issue where I was kind of like tilting a little bit. I took some videos in training and I couldn't quite figure out why. But I was like, okay, like if you start to tilt and you can kind of feel your alignment. I'm a rope hugger, as in I like to hold the rope on the way down. And like most like proper free divers, you fall and you just like are nice and aligned with the rope and you're watching it. But I like to dive with my eyes closed the whole time, which means I feel totally in the middle of nowhere unless I like have that rope and I can kind of sense if I'm like tipping to the side or like forward into the rope or backward into the rope.
How do you hold it?
I hold it so that it's like aligned down in my open palm like this. So it's kind of on my shoulder.
For those of you that are only listening, can you describe?
Yeah, so I hold it kind of on I have my palm facing my knees, like an open palm, and I have the line passing my left shoulder down to that palm. So I'm not holding the line, it's just kind of like brushing against my palm. So you're
dragging across the line the whole time that you're diving?
It's pretty, if I feel myself dragging, I'm going to be tilting away from the line a little bit. So that's part of like how I'm sensing my alignment, which I would like to change next year.
I saw a lady at Roatan put her hands on her thighs and then the rope went in between her arms.
So I kind of have that, yeah.
Yeah, and I tried it because I was like, that's really cool, and it freaked me out. I tried to get it on my dive. I was like, oh.
Yeah, so depending on the dive, for some reason on no fins, I will just tuck both my hands into my little thigh loops, and I'm fine free falling with just the line a little bit on my shoulder. So and I think it depends as well what your alignment is when you go into free fall. And I think if I'm a little extra nervous or not sure about my alignment, then I will open my palm so you can kind of really like detect like where you're at.
I usually free fall, like sometimes I'll do over the head.
I used to do that.
And then like that with the palm. But if I want to be super relaxed, I do have it so it's, going through my hands. Mm-hmm. And I like that because then when it's depth time, then I just have the candy cane, lock that, grab the tag, put it, flip it, pull.
Yeah.
But I like it to have it between the fingers by my hip.
Yeah.
And then just dragging it down there and then have an instant turn when you hit that stopper.
Yeah, it's like that easy as soon as that candy cane's there.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot cleaner to not be touching the line and just be able to like have proper alignment. But and especially if there is a thermocline or things like this, it's just a lot more relaxed for me to keep my eyes closed versus like flicker them open every now and again to like check that you're still in front of the line.
Did you still have light at 80 meters?
Not a little bit. I mean, it's pretty blue, pretty clear water. And like on that dive in particular, I was definitely out of EQ at like 75. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I'll just wait, and then I'll turn when like I start to feel that pressure going. And then I think my alarm at like 78, I had incremental alarms. So again, because my plan was to turn early. So I had another alarm at 78. It's like, you can pretty much reach down. So that's exactly what I did. My alarm, I was like, yeah, you should turn now. And my alarm was like, ding, like you can pretty much reach down. So I pretty much just reached down and like really reached and grabbed one of the tags. So this is why I'm like, if I had announced 81, I would have not made that dive. Yeah. So I'm like very proud and happy that I like just went for the 80 because it was like, oh, barely there.
This is where having a long arm span really helps.
Honestly, it really does.
and so then you turn, and then what are you doing? So where'd you put the tag? Like,
yeah, I have
quick on the turn.
Yeah.
So someone described earlier, like you can pull down when you turn, like you can give yourself a boost. Or is that allowed or not allowed?
You can. So there's a space mark depending on AIDA or CMAS rules above and below the stopper, which is what your lanyard catches on. It tells you like you can't go deeper. So between the stopper, the plate, and a little bit above the stopper, there's the candy cane area. So it's marked with striped tape that you may or may not really be able to see at depth. And once you're in that candy cane, you can touch the rope, even on constant weight dive. And you are even allowed to, like, kind of
Stretch.
pull it. Yeah, because you're there.
In CMAS, are you, so like in AIDA, you're allowed to touch the candy cane as much as you want?
Same as CMAS. I think that changed for one of them somewhat recently, because it used to be only one pull. Right?
Yeah, well, they it was one pull, but they made the candy cane bigger.
Okay.
So it's like a bigger space now.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you can now do 2 pulls in the candy cane if you're strategic about it, because if you can pull multiple times, and sometimes like new divers, they don't get themselves in proper alignment, so you really want to get yourself oriented, because if you use your one pull while you're sort of like not you're perpendicular to the line, like you're not really breaking that negative buoyancy, because you're really sinking fast at that point. So you want to get yourself turned around straight, and then give yourself, as a tug, but you also have to be careful, because like giving yourself a really big tug, you can get a lung squeeze. You don't do it.
I will on no fins, obviously in free immersion, but even free immersion, I'm like this on the bottom, But for constant weight, I'm really just using the line to help myself turn, and then I have a little piece of Velcro that I put on my weight belts, the Evolve weight belts, which I found because I used to wear a CNF, a no fins belt, which looks a little bit differently than the lanyards for the other disciplines. It goes around your waist as opposed to like the little surf strap around your ankle or your wrist. And I used to just have my Velcro there, and I would use that belt for every discipline. So I had that Velcro on my hip, and I would just put the tag on my hip. CMAS new this year said you could not use a waist lanyard for any discipline except no fins. But my handy dandy Evolve weight belt has a snap on the side for the excess, little belt strap that kind of flags around. So I put my Velcro tag on that excess belt and then snapped it over. So I had my little makeshift Velcro tag, which is
the reason you can't use a waist lanyard now is like a safety concern for like if they have to drop the counterbalance. Like if it's around your waist, you're going to be like pretty much like perpendicular to the water going up it, and it'll create a lot of drag, and it could open up your airway.
It's like file hook.
Well, let's do a little visual, right?
File hooks.
Yeah.
So you got your waist lanyard, and then you're going up, right? Like you're meant to have it in the wrong way.
Versus if it's like your wrist, you're going straight up.
Yeah.
Or your ankle will tip you straight.
That looks horrible too.
Well, like with the waist lanyard though, you're gonna have a spinal cord injury.
Yeah.
So now you have a deep water blackout and a spinal cord injury. That's real serious, right? Like,
and potentially inhaling water.
Yeah. So like a lot of places don't even like you using on free immersion, and I need to get a longer. I've asked Walt to make me a longer lanyard. Because
I really like the waist lanyard. It's so convenient when nothing goes wrong.
When I do a full stroke, like I hit the end by the time I'm here. Like I can't on free immersion do a full. I'm already interrupting my stroke on one side. Ends up being halfway when I'm doing it.
You can get a heavier carabiner as well, and it could go in front of you, which some people don't like either. But
yeah, well, it's like on the way up though. Like the span of the lanyard, is shorter than my arm span.
I know what
so
you
I
mean.
can't.
Yeah.
Like I want it to be a little longer than the distance between my arm, my
But
hands.
if you have a weighted lanyard, it'll be below you, so you won't have the.
But on the way back up, it's below me. But I'm getting, I'm hitting that point.
Okay.
So like I run my hands on the line. So if my lanyard is on this, I'm hitting the lanyard with my hand on the line as I'm still going through, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
That's we're like a gear-free sport, but
but not so free.
But like it's great, like in not going out with other people and I don't bring my float. I'm like, oh, do I have everything? Like, wetsuit, weight belt, mask, snorkel, fins, gloves, watch. Okay, yeah, it's like not a lot of stuff, but you know, when you really get into freediving, you have like a 7 mil, a 5 mil, a 3 mil, a 1.5, a couple computers. You've got like this line and that carabiner, and you know, we do have our things.
Yeah, when the airline lost my bag, and I was like, do you want me to list out all of the items that you will have no idea what they are and how much they cost? We found my bag, so it's all good in the end, but yeah.
About that, quick tip. Take a quick video with your phone of all your stuff in your bag.
And put an air tag in it, because if you do not have any way to track your bag, the airline probably will not either.
Oh, wow. So if you don't
These
have
are
an
good
Apple
general
phone,
traveling tips.
what do you do?
I would still get an air tag, because you can get like a friend to do it or something.
Okay.
Or you can tell them it has one and they can, ping it. Because, they just, my bag was sitting in Seattle for like a week. And it's a weird custom, like monofin shaped gargantuan thing. And I was like, and you can't like you can't check all their boxes to like describe the bag. And I'm like, it's massive. If I send you a picture, I'll send you a picture and you'll know what it is. But once I could send them like a GPS location, I'm like, I can see it sitting right there at the airport. Then they got it to Greece eventually.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
So you're turning.
I'm turning. All right, we're at the turn. So really reach for the turn. Really earned that one.
One other question too is like, is anything going through your mind while you're descending and ascending, or are you just completely in the zone?
Completely in the zone. Really just thinking about mostly my equalization, like going through the same like muscle memories as I do like on all my shallow dives or in any dry equalization training, like going through all of the same little tongue positions and all that jazz.
Do you have the excitement? Like, does it register of, oh, I did all of the right things by only announcing 80? Does your mind go there? No. I
don't have enough like space in my brain for that with how much I'm concentrating on like my mouth.
Do you feel narcosis at 80 meters?
I have not felt a strong narcosis, but I oftentimes, like, I have had before where someone, like, there was a video of my dive or a dive eye or something like this, and they're like, oh, like, your lanyard got, like, caught, what happened, or, like, something, or, like, oh, you had trouble finding the tag on that one, and I, like, cannot remember the bottom plate moments at all. That did clearly not happen on the 80-meter dive, but that has happened to me, and I wonder if maybe that is a little bit of narcosis. I will go back and then I'll remember it, so I don't know. But yeah, I haven't felt strongly narked yet, which is good.
It's an interesting one because like listening to like the Freedive cafe and whatnot is like go through with experiences, and there'll be some people that do like 100+ meter dives don't feel narked at all, and other people do 60-meter dives and feel like very narked.
Yeah, it's very individual.
That's like altitude sickness for opposite. Like some people up there at 12K are like dying, and others are like, oh, just another day.
Yeah, totally. And it really depends, and I think it's also can change on dive to dive. This is why you have to have like smart protocols in place, especially when you're doing deep dives. It's part of the reason too why for the most part I'm training relatively shallow most of the year, because like I don't want to have to deal with like narcosis or doing deep dives on a buoy where there's not so much like if something goes wrong, like someone's just got to pull up that rope like 70 meters, which is not great. So I think that's also part of the reason why I feel like it works well for me to like train shallow most of the year, like be training again those good feelings, because I do talk to a lot of people at these competitions who are really stressed out on their dives, or they're kind of dreading their dives, or they're just dreading getting in the water even if they announce shallow that day. And that's like classic overtraining. Like you've just been doing too many deep dives, like you're stressing your nervous system out. I mean, this is like a whole nother topic. It's like nervous system training. But like that is a huge thing, especially in competition settings where there's additional pressure on your nervous system, and doing those like super deep dives all the time, like even training for a month, like leading up to a competition, and like super respect to athletes who do competitions back to back to back, because that's really intense on your brain. So to do that, you just have to really take care of yourself, really take rest days, and you have to be really conscious about like making sure you are highlighting those good feelings in your brain and listening to your body if you just need to rest or not dive so deep the next day or things like this. Yeah.
Okay, so we've hit the bottom.
Okay, so we've hit the bottom.
We've been at the bottom
We've been at the bottom for a long time.
It's a very long dive. It's a very long
Having a hard
dive.
time finding tag. Yeah, so tag is gone in the belt. We've done the turn. Again, monofin is a little bit awkward, especially in the turn, because it's like this huge piece of equipment. You have to like move through water. So anyway, you get that kind of under you somehow, and then you give your little
Is that a
kick.
higher risk of squeeze with that?
Probably not if you're doing it correctly, but if you're doing very deep PB dives and you don't know how to use it that well, yeah, it's probably not great.
The squeeze is mostly like in the upper body, and that's why free immersion and no fins and like a big tug on the rope are the biggest risks, because you're already so compressed, and then you're doing this big reach, and that can just create a little micro tear in the lung.
Yeah, so and on this 80-meter dive, well, I'll get to this, but on the 80-meter dive, I felt like I did reach a little too far, and I probably didn't need to, or I reached in not the best way or something like that. But so, because on the way up, I felt totally fine, I felt good. Like, it like registers that like I made it, but I'm not thinking like, oh, I got the 8, because I haven't gotten the 80 meters yet, you know? So I'm just focusing on like getting up, but I kind of feel like you're halfway there feeling, or I kind of feel like you're most of the way there, because a lot of my like training has been on EQ and this and that. So even just making it to the bottom, I feel accomplished. And I've never had any like huge hypoxia issues. So the way up, though it might feel long, has never felt like dangerous for me.
So not like strong contractions. Or
I
hypoxic.
get strong
those?
contractions, but I
Okay.
get them on the way down. I'm like an early contraction gal, which is not super fun, but you just kind of, it's almost like because I get them strong so early and often, they don't really freak me out anymore.
I kind of pretend I'm breathing every time I feel one.
Yeah.
It calms my mind. I was like,
Yeah,
oh.
kind of, sink you in a
That's
little
one way to look at it.
If you think you relax through it, right, then it's fine. And like there is no right way. Like the strongest Canadian freediver, Sheena McNally, and she always get contractions, and she, people told her like, you're gonna squeeze. She's never had a squeeze. I mean, that was true as of last year, but like she's diving 90 meters in every depth discipline besides no fins, and like she's never had a squeeze, and she's getting contractions. So you just got to work with your own body. And what I even like about that is like people, big freedivers telling her like, this is going to be a problem for you, and it hasn't been, like it just, if somebody tells you like, oh, this isn't how it's done, or it's got to be different, then go find another opinion. Like, just you're gonna work with the body that you have, right? If that body has contractions, or like it doesn't mean you can't have an enjoyable dive. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and this is the cool part about competition too, because you kind of talk to people about their dives, and you just learn that like different things work for every different person, and you kind of pick up okay, this is normal. Okay, that doesn't happen to me. That's weird. Or like, I don't know. So that's a pretty cool thing to kind of pick up along the way.
And you write these things down. Like, eventually everyone's going to hit a plateau in training. And then so you remember, it's like, oh yeah, this person does this. And that's the beauty for me of competitive freediving. Like, we need each other. And so I can tell you exactly what I do, exactly how I train. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do it. But if I'm open with you, then you're probably also open with me. And so eventually when I hit that block in my training, I'm like, oh yeah, Christina does this. Oh, that could be cool training. Like, why don't I try that? Like, when you start getting into those deeper, like where it is just a few meters, and it can be the difference between being good and being bad, how you do everything matters, right? Like, that small drag on the line might be the difference for you between 78 and 85, right? Like that might increase the speed, but everyone has to like take that and work with that. And so being a sport that's really open and inclusive, like that's such a warm experience for me.
Yeah. And doing a bit like, speaking of like the way up and things like this, I was watching any like discipline where I'm just like not as confident, I will go watch dive videos of like my friends diving or like, you know, the record holders diving and watch their dives and how they're doing it. Not to be like, hey, this is the way you actually do it. Because again, everyone does something a little bit different. So I'll watch a couple different people's videos and kind of like pick up techniques. So like for monofin, obviously on the way up for a lot of disciplines, you want to be moving small and fast. So the initial kick off the bottom is like you're kind of, you know, going like this as opposed to on the way down. A friend told me like she actually goes really slow in amplitude like this on the way down, but for the way up you're doing this.
It's a wiggle for those who are listening.
Oh yes, a wiggle. You're doing a small wiggle, frequent wiggle on the way up, and a nice easy wiggle on the way down. Forward. So when you're on the way up, you do your turn, you've got your tag, then it's like, okay, I'm focusing on still staying relaxed, but I'm moving quickly now off the bottom to kind of get that momentum. I don't have super flexible shoulders, so I will go into the arrow position above my head. But I will kind of change it up as on my way up. So I won't do it initially because it's a lot of pressure on your upper body to put your arms all the way above your head, especially if you're not that flexible. So I'll do the initial part without the
pressure's
arms.
a little bit less than do it.
Yeah, so once that pressure eased up, I have my momentum, then I'll go into the arrow position, kind of making sure I'm staying tucked in because I am having contractions. So this is where my bad posture works for me because I'm very like concave. Then I'll just kind of keep my rhythm going. I'll like sing a song if I'm getting like nervous or like bored is the wrong word, but like you're waiting for the dive to feel better or to like hear your ascent alarm. So if I get a little antsy, then I'll sing in my head.
Where were your ascent alarms and where were the safety divers meeting you?
Safety divers were meeting, actually I'm not entirely sure.
Wait, we're not even there yet because that's above, right? So what song?
Still below. We're the Champions is my ascent song. It's actually really good because it's a slow paced song, but it's like powerful, you know? So it's like in your head and you just kind of like cruise with it. It's really, I highly recommend.
Amazing.
Yeah. And you kind of like get the rhythm going, so it's
This is
good.
why you're the deep diver.
Yeah. You know, trade secrets.
Anyone else here have an ascent song?
I have a spearfishing
Gotta
song.
get one.
Oh, what's your spearfishing song?
I forgot what the title was. It's all Fall
You can
Out Boy
sing it
song.
instead.
I'm not very good singer,
Sing
but
it.
like, the key chorus is "You'll never catch us, so just let me be."
Oh.
You're
That's
doing this while you're down there?
As a fish singing to me, it's like I wish I will.
Oh, I love that.
It's the competitiveness, right? It says no and you're like, yes.
You know, I only hear music once, and that's when we're crab diving.
Yeah.
And as soon as I get to the crab, and you know, there's like you're picking out which one you want, and then when you're going for them, they start scattering. I hear the banjo music.
We have to make that video now.
Nice.
Yeah. I have some Sam Smith as my static song.
Okay.
Yeah, you gotta, I'm like I'm a singer.
Sweet.
Mind singer, so.
Nice.
Yeah, and then my depth alarm, I set at 40 meters. I think on my other dives, I set it at 30 just in case I didn't see the safeties. And then I think I set another one at 10 to remind myself to stop finning because you're positively buoyant. So to just kind of float the rest of the way. And on most of my dives, unless they were really stressful, although I think on all of these dives, as soon as I can kind of sense that I'm near the surface, I don't like look up, but you can kind of tell from the safeties and the water color and things like this. Then I'm already starting to think about my protocol, which in CMAS is different than in AIDA, because in AIDA there's more steps, and in CMAS all you have to do is give the okay sign. You don't even have to say I'm okay, but you do have to do it facing the judge the first time. So I try and come up, if not already facing the right way in the boat, which depending again on your stress levels on your dive, you may or may not be aware of. So, but in any case, once you surface, you gotta be facing the judge.
How do you know where the judge is?
The judge is in a bright red shirt usually, and they're typically sitting like on the boat or platform or whatever it is. And they're they're right around you, right? You've got your safeties in the water, and then it's usually there's the judge that's got, they're waiting for you.
Is there only one judge in CMAS or two?
There's two around.
Yeah, and do they do one in the water and then one?
Not necessarily. I'm actually not sure what the official rules are on that though.
And you have 20 seconds, right, to give an okay sign?
I believe so, yeah.
And CMAS is different in that they give you a card right away, whereas AIDA, they watch you and they observe you. So
they do wait as well.
Oh, they do?
Yeah,
it just seems like it's so much faster, in watching.
It's because they don't have to wait for the full. There's not a full protocol. I feel like so in AIDA, it's almost like in steps, right? Like some people may come up. They take their facial equipment off. They stay a few. You still have to do it within a certain amount of time, but it might feel longer.
Well, it's 15 seconds, but if it's a world record dive or it's a world championship, they make them wait a full 1 minute before they give a judgment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think CMAS is 30 seconds. Period.
Yeah. Okay. It just it seemed like as long as people came up, did the okay sign, and so the difference between AIDA and CMAS. So AIDA, you have to take off your facial equipment. And so if that's goggles or nose clip or whatever, but at that point, your protocol has started. And then you have very specific steps that you need to do. You need to remove facial equipment, give the okay sign, and say, I'm okay to the judge.
Is it required to look at the judge when you give the okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be I'm okay or I am okay. But if I, start my protocol, I'm okay, right? As long as I haven't removed my facial equipment, I'm okay, right? But, so then the coach can be like, goggles, right? But if I forget my nose clip and say, I'm okay, red card. It's no good. Mm-hmm. Or if I go back for my goggles, let's say I take my goggles, get my nose clip, and then I go for my goggles again.
Oh,
yeah. So there's that.
It gets very
what
nuanced.
What if you say, I okay?
No.
Really?
No.
The syntax matters.
Yes.
Or the grammar.
Yeah.
Wow. What if they're an English learner?
You have to learn. And so in training, if you're an athlete that wants to do competition, I do recommend, if you're doing AIDA, that you do the surface protocol after every single dive, every training dive. So I've been this with Ben, so always plant yourself, always take 3 to 5 breaths, and then do the full thing. I am okay. And don't just pretend to take the glasses off. Take the glasses off, take the nose clip off. I am okay. Every single time, exactly the same. Because if you're on the edge, your body's going to do what it's trained to do, what it remembers. And what I see actually most in athletes that are it's easy for them all the time. In competition, they sometimes have a problem on the surface because they're so used to just finishing a dive and taking a breath and being like, I'm okay, that suddenly in competition, if they are on the edge, they don't take their proper breaths, and then they'll have an LMC or something. They actually would have been just fine on the dive if they just breathed 3 times, but sometimes they didn't. So that's interesting, though, in CMAS that your coach can't say anything.
Yeah, there's no coaching beyond after official top. I think your coach isn't even allowed to be in the immediate area. They can be beyond the boundary. But no one is allowed to, you cannot cheer or do anything until the card is presented. Otherwise, it's a red card.
If your coach cheers.
If anyone cheers.
If anyone cheers?
So everyone in that competition space has to know these rules. There was an issue last year.
What if I don't like someone?
So that's a black hat winning right there. You have your spies infiltrate their
right. Well, it's up to the discretion of the judge as well. So if they think someone sabotaged that rule, that person will immediately
I'm gonna get that bitch.
They will be disqualified.
It has happened before.
It has
definitely happened.
It has happened. It happened last year on a world masters world record.
Drama.
That's embarrassing for that person.
Well, they Yeah, so that's a difference in CMAS. For AIDA, you can have a coach, mostly a friend or a fellow athlete, who is next to you, and they're going, breathe, breathe, breathe. Take your goggles off. Give the sign. say it.
Wow.
And so they can, and that is honestly extremely helpful. So in CMAS, all you have to do is throw the OK sign with your hand. You don't have to take anything off or whatever, but you do have to be facing the right way. And there's no one there to kind of like, you know, have you get it together if you're a little on the edge.
Put your index finger with your thumb. Put it out there.
Yeah, you
Then
just
recite the
gotta be ready.
alphabet backwards and walk.
Sometimes it feels like it. No, but you have to be ready. And a lot of people in CMAS will also they'll just do the AIDA protocol by practice, by standard, and as a little extra, like, I'm doing great, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
What's the matter?
Crazy.
What's the matter?
Huh. So, question about like the free fall versus coming up. So like, there's a moment when you like don't have to work so much and suddenly you just start dropping on the free fall. What's the difference feel like once you're at that depth for so long and you're going up? Is it similar? And like when the buoyancy starts taking over, like what's going on there?
No, you have to swim a lot more on the way up. Because you're not positively buoyant until 10 meters, depending on where you weight yourself. So that means you do have to swim all the way till 10 meters versus your free fall, which sure, it does technically start after 10 meters, but normally you're kicking down past that a bit, and you're free falling the rest of the way versus like on the way up, you really are kicking, typically.
So for you, is that pushing you into that point where you start feeling the lactic acid burn, or are you still kind of more in the aerobic phase?
I definitely feel the lactic acid, and I'll change my kicking or my finning like technique on the way up at various points. So I think bifins is maybe the best example because there's more ways to vary it, and frankly I don't know that much about monofin. I just throw it on, but for bifins,
just throws it on and dives.
For bifins, for example, on the way up, like at the bottom, you know, you're doing your nice, like, closed amplitude flutter kicking, nice and powerful. And then your legs start to get tired. So then you can kind of change the amplitude of your kick a little bit, and you can make your fin strokes a little bit wider to kind of just, like, change it up a bit. And then once you start getting lactic acid buildup in your legs or in those muscles, then you can change into a little bit more of a knee kick. So you're using a little bit more of your calves and your thighs. Yeah, I move a little bit into a bicycle because you have to change your muscle groups.
Yeah.
And then you start crawling.
Yeah, exactly.
New students, don't listen to this part.
Then you desperately grab the rope. No, yeah. And actually, you know what? I changed fins so last year at Worlds, I had someone sponsoring my fins, but they didn't show up until the day before the competition started. And I threw them on anyway and trained and did, dives with them. And it was fine. But this year I was like, okay, I have these like cool fins that I got that I really should train with. And I realized that my bifins, I'm used to having my really long, pretty dive fins, which are like great for little flutter kicks. And the Molchanov's fins I have are shorter and they're more at an angle. So I actually have to break my knees a little bit when I fin with them. And it's kind of like, instead of like bicycling, it's more like walking. So I'm not like going like this with them, but it's more like walking where you're giving a little bit of a bend and a lift to your knee ever so slightly. And it works for those fins. So you can like change up your techniques a little bit. And especially if it's a long way up and the end of the dive, you're starting to get that muscle fatigue or lactic acid. It does serve you to change muscle groups, even if it's a less efficient kick. In theory, if it's towards the end of your dive anyway, you shouldn't be having to kick as hard. So if you lose a little bit of efficiency on that finning, it's all right if your legs aren't burning and you're almost there. At least for me, that's what works pretty well.
So notice you didn't mention like a dolphin kick with bifins. Is it really inefficient?
Well, you can't do a dolphin kick if you have bifins in a constant weight bifins discipline.
You're not allowed to.
You're not allowed to.
Oh, wow.
So it's like basically a habit you don't want to form is like doing a bicycle kick.
So
or a mermaid king.
I just
Dolphin
looked, and so I know the answer to this. But how did the dive end?
Wow, she double checked, she fact checked.
Well,
I'm really
You had a great fact
mathy
check
and
into this
about
debate.
numbers.
Yeah.
And so that, like, I just wanted people that are listening or watching to have context about what that means to dive to 80 meters on a worldwide perspective. And so I just want Christina to tell us, and then I'll like throw out some math from my engineer brain here.
yeah, I did get a white card. I did my protocols okay. I didn't feel like hypoxic at the end. I definitely felt tired, and I did feel a little bit tight. I think from that big old reach. So I did end up going and breathing some no blood.
Okay.
No blood, no wheezing, nothing like that. But I felt a little bit of tightness, which also could have been from like being at 80 meters for the first time. So I did go and breathe a little bit of oxygen, which is pretty standard procedure if you're diving deeper than like 70 meters, I think most competitions say, which I'd never done before. So I did something.
That was your first time breathing oxygen?
Yeah.
So all of these, it's amazing to me because you dove 5 dives in 6 days, like furthering your PB. You're not breathing oxygen, and you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper.
I sleep a lot. Honestly, after my dives, I go and get a decaf affogato. Yes, I have ice cream twice a day during competition. And then I go, yeah, right?
I like this training.
And I lose so much weight during competing too, and I'm like, yeah, it's my twice ice cream and like nap all day.
This is amazing, probably because we're diving deeper than me. When I would deep train, I gain weight. Like, I have to limit the amount of food that I'm eating because I feel like I have worked just as hard. So, like, if I'm doing a hard dynamic training in the pool, which is a 40-minute session for me, I can eat, like, a full rack of ribs, French fries, like, you know, dessert, no problem. But I still want to eat that much after deep diving because I feel like I've worked that hard because it's harder on the central nervous system. And I remember, like, a World Championships discovering that this one restaurant made amazing cheesecake. Actually, I can't remember exactly what happened, but something happened with the Japanese that they felt the need to bring a cheesecake. Sure. I don't remember exactly what that was. So they brought a cheesecake over, and like, that was it. I was hooked. So this cheesecake was so good. So then I started eating cheesecake every day. And
happy feelings are important.
Well, my at the time, it was no fins. Like, I was competing in constant weight and no fins at the World Championships, this was back when you used to have to qualify, and then you had your, you know, the top 5 or whatever competed for the medal. So, like, in no fins, a half pound of lead makes a really big difference, and like, I had to change my weighting by like I had a whole extra pound of lead from all of the extra cushion I was getting from eating the cheesecake.
That's amazing.
Because it was great. Like, cheese, you know, it's in the fridge coming back. It's like, oh, I'll have a little piece of cheesecake while I'm preparing lunch, and a little cheesecake after dinner, and like, I have to.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So that's great that you could just eat ice cream.
You know, honestly, my appetite tends to like slim down. I don't know if it's because like my stomach is like making room for my lungs or whatever, the million die response or whatever it is. But yeah, I try and have like a big lunch and then a small dinner. That's part of my pre-dive prep, and then obviously ice cream after. But yeah, so
What flavor?
It depends. There was this amazing Greek flavor that I couldn't tell you what it was, but it was made from some sort of like leaf or a flower, and I couldn't even say it, but I showed up and they always knew what I wanted.
That's great. So for everyone who's like listening and watching, you know, that dive for Christina made her 21st in the world in constant weight.
Woo! That's cool.
In CMAS, and then a little bit more than 76 all around, you know, which is a huge dive. Like, constant weight is the discipline that is the oldest and deepest. So, like, a lot more divers have been doing that. Like, some of the classic freedivers, you know, in the AIDA system, there wasn't bifins discipline. Like, that's a relatively new discipline. So, like, the constant weight was the the gold star. And, that is an awesome dive. So you're not quite number one in the U.S. because, wow, the U.S. women are actually
U.S. women are on fire.
Yeah, and Shante is 96, Natalie Bruce is 82, and then I'm sure some of these are probably getting pushed deeper.
Yeah, Talia as well. Sometimes she competes for South Africa, so I don't know which.
In CMAS, or is she allowed to switch back?
So Ada, she's in South Africa this year, and CMAS, she's U.S.
Yeah, because in AIDA you have to be with it for 2 years.
Right.
So you can't switch over year. So if you want to switch, then you're in that for 2 years. So you can't just go do a record for one and
So I don't follow any sports at all. So is this in the Olympics or what do you guys? Is this what?
This is just world overall rankings. Pretty new. They have the Freedive ranking site, which for the first time pulls together results from both CMAS and AIDA, because previously each one kept their record bank separate. I mean, they still do keep them separate. So there was no way to know kind of where you stand between both.
And CMAS record bank, I don't know where any of that exists.
I think the nationals or even beyond that, for example, for the US, they posted on the site, but there's someone who keeps the continental thing. It's not very official yet.
Yeah, AIDA is actually wonderful for this because they've got not all the historic competitions, but pretty close. They went through, and so you can click on any athlete, you can see what competitions they've participated in, how they do, and so this is kind of something that I'll use for vetting freediving buddies. So if I meet somebody and they say that they're a competitive diver, and I'm like, oh, what country are you from? And then I just I'll find them on the AIDA ranking, and then see, right? It's really an easy way to, if you're reaching out and you're meeting people that are in other countries, I want to believe everybody at their word, but it's really in the what shows up in the rankings.
Or if you're really competitive strategic, you can look them up before a competition and see where they're at.
Yeah.
I'm going to do 80.5 meters next.
Mind games. He's going to take everyone out to a party for the dive.
Oh, yeah.
The one that drinks the least.
There you go.
So we're closing in on the 2-hour-ish mark. You mentioned that you like to do fundraising for a certain thing, and you probably have some kind of following, so you want to throw your plugs up in there.
Yeah, well, we're pretty much wrapped for this year, but for the U.S. Freediving Federation CMAS Worlds team, pretty much every year they're raising funds that goes directly to the athletes to pay for their registration fees, at least, and most of it is crowdfunded. So I've been helping the athletes out this year and putting on events and raffles and tapping into the local communities to raise that money. So if you ever see a shout out go out, or there's an event or something, even just showing up to support, it does make a difference overall, and the money does add up. So we raised all of our goals this year, and that everyone's registration was fully covered, which is super awesome considering how many athletes there were in registrations.
How much is registration?
So registration for outdoor for the depth competition worlds was around $800. I think it's €750, and the indoor worlds team had to pay, I think it was €550 or €500, something like that. So yeah, and we had both teams fully funded this year, so that was really awesome.
Yeah, and I just want to give kudos to you because you're an athlete. You're top 20 ranking athlete, top 3 athlete in your country in this discipline, and you took the time to support other athletes and to give back to the organization as a whole. I mean, Sam did catch some of the earlier pre-talk that we were doing where Ben was asking questions of what who's funding all of these organizations, and we need to volunteer. I'm currently the treasurer of AIDA Canada, not because I really like being the treasurer, but because it was my time, because they've served me, they've supported me, so that they sit through some of the long meetings of all of the internationals and all of the things, and it's great to give back. And the cool thing with a lot of these organizations, with it being volunteer, is like your voice does have a really big impact.
You mentioned that they do need help. Like, what type of help do they need? Then, like, how do you kind of reach out to that?
So if you are a member of a national, then they'll have an AGM, right? And they'll have certain initiatives. So there can be positions on the board. There can be like subcommittees, like obviously what Christina's doing, helping with fundraising. Are you officially on the board, or you're just kind of like helping?
I have an official position that's volunteer role for the year.
Yeah. So like you can get to be a part of that, and sometimes like the stuff through AIDA Canada that we deal with is like, what is AIDA Canada doing for the recreational community, right? Like, why would we pay fees for this? Because at the core prime of it, they do support competition. And so people don't always realize, well, what are they doing? I mean, at the board meeting, at the AGM, there's like the same 15 people that show up every year, right? There's a lot of freedivers in Canada. It's always the same 15, right? And so it's great to get to know other people and to see how you can be supportive. And I definitely do like a plug for the volunteering, even if you don't want to, just because at some point it is your time to give back, right? Having been an athlete, and if you're kind of newer in your journey, you can get to know some of the different people and struggles, and the AIDA, CMAS, kind of going back and forth. I mean, this is my plug for unity, right? Like, we're such a small sport. I really wish that both organizations would just support each other and be less worried about that, and more just like, how do we make freediving safer? How do we support athletes? How do we make freediving athletes be sponsored, not just for their comp fees, but to get there and to train and to be taken seriously, right? Like, it is an intense sport to be performing at the level that, obviously Christina is performing, and she's doing that self-funded, right? So
yeah, I would say as well, like, a lot of the kind of complaints behind the lack of money in freediving is like media presence and like viewership, and that's where a lot of the power is in sports, because then you can get sponsors who will buy into that audience. So going on YouTube and watching some dives from these world events actually has a big impact, because those are metrics that freediving organizations could then show, like, hey, there's like X amount of people who are watching this stream live, or who've watched this competition, and like people are interested in it. So if you are interested in freediving, even if you're not necessarily interested in competitive freediving, go check out some videos, give that some airtime, and like pick up some techniques too. Like I was saying, like I just go back and like look at some finning, different things people do for finning, or different ways people are doing things. So that can be kind of a win-win for everyone too.
Having that deep eye camera follow the divers down is great for that.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's sort of the plug too. I think in the US there's definitely a lot more divers, and I think the teams have been full rostered, right? Like I think the pool wasn't full rostered, but if you're a new diver and you're like, I don't know if I'm ready to go do a world championship, apply. It's like the coolest experience ever. You're going to meet all of the top athletes in the world, and they're going to give you tips and tricks and ideas, and it's inspiring to like watch somebody set a world record. It's so cool. And if you're at these big competitions, you're on a line, you've got a dive eye, or you've got like perfect video, you get to see yourself on YouTube, you get to see, oh, this is what I got to work on my technique. Like, it is such a life-changing experience. I went to my first world championship in 2008, I think, and I came home and my life completely changed. So I almost didn't go because I was like, oh, it's a lot of money, and it was time from work, and like I came home, made my whole job online, started like sublet my apartment out in Los Angeles, started living around the world, went from like Greece to Egypt, and like that. It's crazy what could happen. So, if you are a newer diver, I do encourage you to at least apply to go to the World Championships.
Apply, or at least take a step and try a competition, because that's also what helps grow the freediving community. And, you know, if your friends see that like, oh, you went to a comp, they will be most likely, you know, more eager to compete as well. So if you're at all interested in it, go try one, bring a friend. It's like, it's an amazing experience, and it's really good for the sport to keep growing and getting bigger and getting safer and things like that.
And support your local competition, right? Like, don't think like next year I'm going to compete because I'm going to be ready. No, like there might not be a next year. Like if there's a comp, do it, support it. Like even if it's just for one start, like go in and try. You're never going to feel fully ready for your first comp. No one feels ready for their first comp.
Yeah.
That's
Like
awesome.
you did your first one in like Azul, and then we actually had one in Snohomish and Tukwila this year for pool comps, just locally.
That was like right before I moved.
Yeah.
Could have made
And-
friends.
Yeah. And then there's like in Canada with like the How Deep, and then where's Vertical Green?
Vertical
It-
loop.
No, there's a Vertical
the
Green
Vertical
too.
Green. It is out of Redondo Beach. We didn't
Yeah.
have it the last 2 years, but I
Yeah.
think we're on.
Hopefully it
hoping
comes
for
back.
next year, yeah. I think it will.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Lance is building a platform.
We'll throw these in the description for sure, but are there any like URLs or anything that people should be looking
Yeah.
at specifically for these if they're interested in getting deeper?
Yeah, there's, I mean, on my website, I do have a link to the CMAS calendar and also to the AIDA calendar. And then you can just go competitions. It shows all throughout the world. And I do definitely recommend checking both because, you know, it's not like unless you're in the Philippines, there isn't a competition even every month. But in some parts of the world where they have a real robust population, like there's competitions everywhere. But I mean, here, if you search competitions North America, it's slim. Mexico's doing a pretty good job of having a competition about once every 3 months, either depth or pool. And the Mexican competitions, like when I went to a pool comp a couple years ago, I think the entry fee was $150 for 4 starts. They had poolside massages. It was a 50-meter pool.
Okay.
That's like the price of a massage.
Yeah, and it was included in the comp fee. You just like, they had 2 masseuses just with tables, so after you do your dive, you just sit down, they give you a 20-minute massage.
When you said poolside, I thought you'd be able to do a static while someone's like massaging you.
You actually can do a static and have someone massage you. It's in the rules.
Really?
Wait, what?
Yeah, you can be touched as much as you want in static. Like I actually,
I could hold my breath for so long. Just like,
yeah. So you can have that. The only time they can't touch you is when you start coming up. As soon as your airway leaves the water, if somebody touches you, you're disqualified. The first time I actually saw Davida Carrera, he was doing a static. It was back at the Team World Championships, so it used to be static, dynamic, and constant weight. Those were the 3 disciplines. And his partner was like rocking him like a baby.
Amazing.
So he was just like in her arms, and he's just like right before, and you know, I mean, static's actually like one of the weirdest things to watch in competition, like how people prep for it and what they do, and you know, it's back in different times. So yeah, we just see really wonderful things.
Actually, the next U.S. competition is a pool comp in Tampa, Florida, that I think is coming up in December.
Yeah.
So if anybody's got the bug, we can maybe link that, depending on when you guys are releasing the video.
Probably
Yeah.
used to help after all those hurricanes too.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And that one's a 50-meter pool comp, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, so in dynamics, the turns in everything other than no fins are the hardest because you have these fins, and so you're coming with speed into a wall and then like have to motivate and come around. So you want to have for dynamic and dynamic high fins, it's much easier to do it in a longer pool. Because you basically lose like 3 seconds making that turn. So that would equate to like 3 extra meters in your distance.
It's also stressful and awkward.
Gotcha.
You
Coming
probably
from
burn a
someone
lot
who
of
doesn't
oxygen on those turns.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Our
the
camera guy left, but it's like
He's retired.
Sam's not
Well
here.
done.
we're done, but the camera's still rolling.
Sam's not here for the outro, but he'll play us out.
We're just gonna start crinkling wrappers in the mic
Yeah,
now.
and I mean, I think like the interesting one about competition is like this is obviously like my huge passion, and I could sit here and like jam with Christina for like the next 6 hours to just do like an enduro competition talk. But it is really a wonderful thing, and I do encourage everyone to join us at some point in time.
I'll do line dive one time with you this winter.
This winter.
Winter. Oh. You don't even like going to Nia Bay in the spring.
I didn't say competition, I just said line dive.
I do want to go dive in Alpine Lake so bad. Like, I want to figure out a way to, like, snowmobile some, like, warm stuff up there, cut a hole in the lake, and then...
I have zero desire to do that.
Get some photos.
I thought we talked about crab. I thought we talked about crab, winter crab.
Where is the sauna? Like, cause
it'd be right on the shore.
Yeah, so if there's like a sauna that I can get into immediately after ice
I've heard you
diving.
can rent sauna boats on Lake Washington.
Sauna boats?
It's not Lake Washington, it's Lake Union.
Lake Union? Oh, okay.
Wait,
I don't want to
hot
dive in
tub
Lake
boats.
Union, though.
Hot tub boats, yeah.
Hot tub boats.
Oh, sauna boats is different? Oh, yeah, they would be different.
I think I was thinking
there are
hot tub.
sauna boats.
I might have been thinking
I
about
feel
hot tub.
like a sauna would be bad for the neoprene.
Yeah. But a hot tub, though.
I
Well,
was-
even
I
chlorine,
think
though.
wearing a wetsuit into a sauna
there's no
sounds like
chlorine
my
in it.
worst nightmare.
Unless you're in Alpine Lake.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, there was that group of dive and hikers,
I'm not committing to that. I'm not
It's
committing
pretty
to
fun.
hike and dive group that like to go on multiple mile hikes and then dive in alpine lakes.
That's too intense for me.
I'm
I'm not that intense.
I hiked up, like, minimum gear to go dive at Alpine Lake in, like, summer, and it was, like, so cold. It was the worst and scariest thing ever.
The easiest one to do is Cachis. Like, it has a snow park that you can get to even in the winter.
Oh.
Yeah, no.
Like, yeah. Like, they plow the roads to a certain part. It's like about a mile away from the nearest like water entry, and so it's a pretty long hike if you do that. But you could take a snowmobile and go up there. Although I don't think the lake usually freezes though.
I will hike to the hot spring and get in that water.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That's
Snowmobile.
okay.
Yeah, hot spring sounds good.
Yeah.
And in the summertime, Cachis is kind of like Lake Crescent light.
And I would do a cold plunge after getting out of the hot tub.
Yeah,
And
I've
then
plunged.
get back in, but-
And then get right
Easy stuff.
plunge and then run very quickly out of the water.
Exactly. Awesome.
Yeah.
Dang. Well, thank you for your time.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for having me around, guys.
It's so great.
Good job, Sean.